All right, we're recording.
Okay, so here, I'm just jumping in the Google Meet here real quick. Okay, good evening. It is 7:19 and it's kind of like to call the governance committee meeting to order. All right, Ms. Cho, may we please have a roll call for attendance? Anderson?
Present.
Levy?
Present.
Miller? Present.
All members are present for the governance.
Thank you very much. At this time, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Anderson, second by Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously, which takes us to the approval of the minutes from January 2022. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda or sorry, on the minutes, or would anybody like to make a motion to approve them?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Anderson, second by Levy to approve the January 25th, 2022 governance committee meeting minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously, which takes us to item 2, organizational items. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the superintendent evaluation tool. It looks like we're trying to come up with a timeline. Is that right, Dr. Kieser?
Yeah, so we've, the board has reviewed, 2 tools. The board unanimously, recommended the, CC6 tool. I've met with CC6 and had a talk with board president, Miller, and what we need to do is establish when we would like to transition to that tool. My recommendation would be to transition with the new school year. The contact with CC6 says that we can initiate the switch over at any time. They will follow us and start to schedule board trainings, superintendent trainings, and check-ins throughout the next 12 months moving to the new tool. So if the governance committee is good with that, I can certainly reach out on behalf of the board.
Perfect. Any questions or discussion? Go ahead.
I think for the purpose of discussion, I know that we said that we would finish using the tool that we already have. So, and then we're scheduled again to complete that around the June 30th, around that time frame is where we're at. So then, starting with the CISA 6, are there, like for the workshop or how they talk about getting us into the process, would that be like an early July and they will begin to work with us, or when would it?
In my conversations, my CC6, they were fairly open on timeline. It used to be a much more involved process, and they have scaled it back. So yes, it will still be a chunk of time, but it won't be what it was. They streamlined it quite a bit. My recommendation would probably be to do something shortly after the school year ends. So that we would be able to go into July and start the school year with kind of goes in alignment with their strategic plan.
So that's more like in the, like something like get started into the new tool, because all the new board members are going to be on. We're having that evaluation conversation. We're closing out the right, closing out in the last 2 in the beginning, so yeah. So yeah, like June is, yeah, that works.
Perfect. Thank you. Board Member Anderson, any thoughts or questions?
No, I'm perfectly.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Lee, for clarifying that. I agree with Board Member Anderson. That sounds appropriate. Dr. Kieser, do you need a phone? motion, or are we ready to get a consensus there?
I'm good with consensus, I can reach out and then, start to schedule, those times, or get some dates and times to bring that back.
The thing that one of the things that we've talked about, I guess we've been talking about this with Drew too, about like when our norms or culture we're creating. Then when we get to the evaluation stuff, I would like that to be the only thing that we're dealing with at that time. Multiple events, but just it's the purpose of the evaluation, focus on the meeting that night, so that's I think what it is.
I appreciate you saying that, and you're right, that has been sort of like our ambition, and I won't say our practice, because I know we've had a few, but for the most part, it's been like our practice and aspiration to do that, and I agree that is something that we should, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something you probably should put into some kind of like written expectation. I fully support that. Board Member Anderson, are you good with that?
Most definitely.
Absolutely, great. Dr. Keiser, is there anything else that you need from us for 2A? Fantastic, so that takes us to item 2B. What's attached there is the, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the last board development report that was completed that went over in June, is that correct? And then it's got the initial results without, so school perceptions hasn't had a chance yet to give a longitudinal, like anything, right? But this is just the kind of the raw data sort of charts for this most recent one?
Correct, so I had a conversation with Rob from School Perception, so he's writing the longitudinal reports, usually those to us ASAP. What I have uploaded is the previous annual report development tool, so that is what the template will look like with the longitudinal data. But I have a draft of the words of the census, also a copy for currently new board members in the ones to hand those out and later the comments later. So people can take a look at the drafts.
Perfect, I love that. I don't know if everybody had a chance to kind of look over the drafts. Does anybody have any comments, thoughts, or questions on the initial data? And again, like school perceptions will give us a more lengthy.
Right, I just wanted I saw the, Mr. Draft.
It was uploaded this afternoon, so
I missed that one. So this is, well, just a different set of graphs for the last assessment we took.
this is the most recent assessment of the draft. Raw data without the formatting, without putting it side by side with historic data. And the comments are in there as well.
Gotcha. No, I just think that the, as we're in this meeting, that just as we evaluated our superintendent, and the purpose, was because one of the things that we said with board stuff evaluation, is looking at the work of the 7 of us first and trying to get that into alignment. And then along with evaluating the superintendent, that we're trying to set that practice for us to come back to it twice a year is to focus again on the things that we should be doing. And then find alignment, whether it's not, and put things into place to continue to set the agenda and stage for our committee meetings and our board actions together. So like I said, as we're moving into, once everyone on the board who is serving now completes, we'll see this again in May or later in April.
So what we're gonna do, you framed it really nicely. The whole reason that we're doing this is we agreed to do this twice a year so that we can be critically self-reflective and produce our own growth, right, and be responsible for, increasing our capacity as a component. So we're gonna take a look at, once the school perceptions piece is done, it'll come up at a regular board meeting at the appropriate time between April and May. I would just, or pretty much the end of April, so it'll be between May and June, as soon as possible. And then we'll have a chance to have a guided discussion on the school perceptions that we can then use those takeaways to guide our board development.
Right, kind of roughly the time place that we put it at is that current board members will have completed it. New board members will be seeing what the last board said, and then later in about October, thereabout, the new board members will be assessing at that time too.
That's correct.
Last year, got elected in April and completed the survey in April, so you don't have much time on the board to kind of evaluate different practices, and the longer you've been on the board and actually see some of the things that work, it does change what your perception of work is, so.
Absolutely, and that was, the reason behind making it a schedule, so that the data that we would produce would be meaningful, and it wouldn't be just like, oh, well, they didn't say to click through, you know, so, we'll have some substantive discussion on this, and then we'll revisit again, everybody will have a chance to take it down in October, so we'll be doing it twice a year. Just clarifying for the audience here, everything's good, okay. Fantastic, so that takes us then, if we have, does that conclude item 2B? Great, so that takes us to item 2C, the onboarding of new board members. There are two attachments, the one to the left that just says new board member onboarding is our original kind of draft PowerPoint from November. And so in preparing the one to the right that says new member onboarding 2, I just tried to take our notes from discussion that we've had at the governance committee and with Drew in our work, and I tried to put together sort of like a PowerPoint to help guide what we're gonna do later this evening. It's not intended to be all encompassing and independent, it's just meant to be like kind of guide us through the process, and I tried to touch on all of our notes and things like that. So if you didn't have a chance to look at this before the meeting, does anybody want me to walk through this real quick? Or did everybody have a chance to kind of look at it?
I saw, like, one of the things I was gonna say is just, I think that, you know, it's more than what we had last year. And, it started out skeletal form, we're just trying to put points on it. And then I think as you go through it, in the next, session, that we'll be able to see. And then I also think, that as we continue in this next year, as we come back to our governance meetings, we should just always, leave a section of the meeting to add new slides that we might, you know, to cover certain things as we, continue to work with the new, and also, capture different aspects of our working together, like, you know, how we're working in expulsion hearings and just certain things like that.
Totally agree. Any other thoughts or comments, board member Anderson?
I would agree with everything that Sean has said, where, I mean, this is more than what we had last year. And let's be honest, it can be a living, breathing document.
Yes. So
as we get to use it this year, we'll see the things that we've missed. And the people that are doing mentorship, everyone can come back to us and say, hey, these are the things you forgot to add on here, and let's just keep growing it. And then as time goes on, things get dated too, so we can change it as we need.
I love the idea of it being a living, breathing document, and I think a future point of discussion should probably be to have like a loose calendar, even for the governance committee, just to ensure that we're revisiting these. You know, sometimes things come up, like global pandemics pop out of nowhere and things like that. So I think it wouldn't be a terrible idea to put somewhere in writing and policy for future agenda item, just to say that, make sure that the governance committee reviews this maybe like by January or something, or something to that effect, but we can come back to that another time. But I love the idea of it being a living, breathing document. Any other discussion on item 2C before we move on? Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the last item that I included was a resolution discussion. We don't have to make sweeping decisions this evening, and given that it is 7:32, I'm totally fine if we want to postpone this discussion as well, but just for the sake of introducing the concept, when I attended a summer workshop, somebody brought to one of the school board members, Mr. Schrader from the Sun Prairie Board of Education, brought to my attention that they had passed a resolution on standardized testing, which intrigued me, and I ran into him recently again, and I asked him to send me a copy of it. As far as I know, that they are the only board in the state to have passed it. It was passed unanimously. If you didn't already have a chance to look it over before the meeting, you'll see that there is some COVID-specific language in there. However, many of the other justifications, demarked by like the whereas pieces, have a lot to do with just like student wellness and just like the integrity of accurately measuring outcomes that are produced by our school system. And I have a lot of other things to say on that, but I'm just gonna pause. I'm just curious, and I'm not necessarily in favor of passing this as worded, but is there interest in the governance committee of us taking a look at taking this document, making it our own, and potentially moving something forward to the full board?
So one of the things I think, when I read through the document, I understand, as an educator, and even a board member, I do understand, the points that they were making about standardized testing. I am not afraid as a board member to foster discussion in our community about educational issues such as what is the place of testing. My thought also is that at this time, one of the things that I think we do have to be careful of, like as we is what do people think we mean?
Right.
And it's always, you know, when you clearly state what you mean, that's what you mean, because it has come out of your mouth. But I do think that, looking at, this discussion, and that's what it says, discussion, we do have to be mindful of the context of our community, how people respond to our board, and the things that we are discussing or things that we decide to take action on. Like I said, there is a place in education where the standardized test can become over-relied upon, or it seems like that is the whole focus. But I think that, you know, as we set our strategic plan and we have conversations with our superintendent about academic issues and academic achievement, I just don't want the wrong message as if this board does not care about academics. We do not care about student achievement. We don't
Right.
care if kids learn. That is a negative and false narrative that exists. And so even as we position discussions, I think that we have to be mindful of that. So as we set that space, everyone does not do well in the standardized testing environment, but people go on to have successful careers, trade, skill, college, without always hitting the benchmarks. But parents are concerned about measurements and are their children at, above, or below where people are saying that they should be. And so that's a part in our emphasis on data and the tools. Even if you think or reflect on the board self-evaluation, there's a whole section about us being data driven. But it's the data that we have, how do we use that? So I understand the intent of the discussion. And I think that it is a discussion that has to be had because even as we continue to work and shape what is academic achievement and how we represent the academic achievement of our students in Beloit, because some of the negative things that are said about our students, they're talking about our students. They're putting our students and our teachers down. And the takeaway from that conversation, how we shape the academic conversation, because in 1 year, I don't think that we'll just become a 5-star district. So conversation about what these metrics are and what we're doing to change them, that has to happen. So I think that the importance of the resolution, and we can continue to talk about this in governance, is to shape our academic conversation, because I do think that in a way, based on some of the misinformation that is out there and the slanderous things that people say about us and downright lies that people tell, we have to do a better job of communicating how are we moving forward academically.
No, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I was going to put forward is, since we are in the process of strategic planning, I did want to introduce the concept. I feel like it would be wise to keep the conversation going, but ultimately perhaps wait to act until the completion of the strategic plan. So that, because one of the things that aspirationally I would like to see in here is like an affirmation and reflection of the priorities, the academic priorities of our district. And since there is always a scarcity of time, resources, finances, et cetera, what is going to be the biggest ROI for our kids and their academic growth and futures, right, to make sure they're well equipped for the lives that they want to have, that we want them to have. And so I think that once we have something that's solidly complete and we can say, we have this plan, this is our goals, and as a district, this is sort of like our letter to our lawmakers and a statement to our community about where our priorities are in a way that concretely values that academic achievement piece. So I don't know if that makes sense, Board Member Anderson, did you have any thoughts?
No, I think Sean did a very good job, like, kind of expressing the concerns about this and trying to make sure we're very clear about what we're trying to do with it. But I also do agree that I think after we get done on the strategic plan, that is a perfect time to revisit something like this. because we just created a whole plan for our district. So we need to make something, or we make it fit to what we need at that point.
That makes sense. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts of this?
No, I just think like in the end, the fact that it's set other space that, for, kudos to the Superior Board, that they're able to support something unanimously. That takes a lot of work to get, board members to that space, and then as a superintendent board team. That's important. As you gave, context by, your statements about where we are in our work, it kind of seems like, this is like an after July thing, after our strategic plan and other conversations. I just don't want to, one of the other things that I think to emphasize is, success for us as a district is not just based on one number or one thing, and we're talking about sustained achievement and the other ways that our students are also showing. Of course, we want every student to read at grade level and to excel. But there are other things that happen on a day-to-day basis where we're a learning organization, and the students in our district are excelling academically, they're excelling in arts, athletics, other activities that make up what the school program is. And so there's a certain space, like in sports, if you want to be a winning team, sometimes you just don't get that winning number, but there's progress and development that is happening along the way. And I think for our students, we'll always be in a lose-lose situation in our district if we let success be defined only in all of your students hit this bench score, because we can, from the outset, we know that it's difficult to move all of those students to that place. And so we can't let success be defined as we're all this or that.
I appreciate it. I don't want to further belabor the point, but I will just, in my own final comment, and then I'll make sure we're all good, is, colleges are increasingly dropping their emphasis on standardized tests. I'm not really sure what the value or meaning of those singular data points really are for our students. And, I guess the last point is, as we talk about being college and career ready, the greatest singular predictor of higher education credential completion is high school GPA. Like ACT, SAT scores are like not even in the top 3 as far as I know, but best predictors, and that's according to data from WTCS and UW. So I think that when we keep our eyes on the prize and really more clearly define, right, what our goals are with the strategic plan, I think that this is something we should consider taking up at that point. So good.
One question I do have is, what's Dr. Keyser's opinion on this too? I mean, we're supposed to be a group and we're supposed to be bringing in everyone, right?
Absolutely.
Appreciate Board Member Anderson. Much like Vice President Levy had shared in terms of the perspective of how individuals and organizations, either be it within the Beloit area or across the state, think about us. I think about it in terms of kind of the lines that you were saying, Board President Miller, is we are going through a strategic planning process to define what is important to us. If we believe that our school district is here because our community exists, the strategic plan is a manifestation of the collective beliefs of the community as seen as the priority actions in the strategic plan. That's what defines our success, not what is artificially placed by a legislature or whatnot. That isn't to say that they should be ignored or dismissed, because although colleges and universities are dropping those standardized tests, scholarships and scholarship committees still look at things like ACT, SAT, as well as GPA and course selections for those scholarships. So part of it is knowing the rules of the game that are around, but not allowing others to define the rules of the game for ourselves, but for us to define what success means to us. Because when we feel that we are successful, our students will feel that they are successful, and that's where other success will come. We just celebrated the junior nights, and I can tell you that's still being talked about. We just, I got an email over the weekend from our coach over at Frusen for the mission to the global finals. Celebrating those small wins talks about the hard work that our students are putting in both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and the structures. And then it's in direct contradiction and it's a counter narrative to the perceptions that are out there. That's how we challenge, that's how we change our district, is by not allowing the narrative to be dictated to us, but us taking over the narrative and dictating the narrative that we want moving forward. So while I think it is perfectly great that some we wanted to go down this, and it's great that we are talking about to see if we have that alignment. My personal belief is that we still need to define in our strategic plan the rules of the game and the metrics that we want to define our success by, and let the rest of the world do what it wants to do, because when we start to arrive, people are going to start to wonder where we came from, and we'll always say we were always here. And that's just how I'm looking at it at this point.
No, that's great. That's very well said. Anybody else? Awesome. So that concludes section 2, future meeting dates. It's just not loading for me, sorry. Right now, it's right now scheduled for the 26th, which would be right after the organizational meeting. So a new governance committee could potentially be attending that governance committee meeting. So any questions on that? Awesome. So that takes us then to adjournment. It is 7:45 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Lee, second by Anderson. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll just say thank you very much. Good meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, just take like 5.
It's 7:52, and I'm told that the internet can hear us talk, and I can see. So everybody's, all of your comments are gonna be recorded and put on the YouTubes. Okay. So it is 7:52, and at this time I'd like to call our, I guess we'll call it it's a special board workshop to order. Ms. Schopp, could we please have a roll call for attendance?
Yes. Anderson,
Present.
Amy Levy. Here. Sean Levy,
Present.
Megan Miller,
Present.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
Joyce Ruff. Absent. Allison Semrau. Absent. All board members are present except Joyce and Allison.
Thank you very much. At this time, that takes us to item 1C, the approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Schneider, second by Anderson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as noted, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, and so that takes us to item 2A, where I'm just gonna give a brief introduction, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Howitt. So, hi, I'm welcoming, in addition to the 5 board members present this evening and Dr. Keith, Mr. Howitt, we're also welcoming Mr. Winfield and Mr. Anderson, who will be sworn in next Tuesday, and we're all very excited to bring you guys into our work here. So we were so excited that we brought you in early. So what we're gonna do is pick up on a discussion that we've started several months ago now for board development. So just a little bit of background, Dr. Kieser and I were talking, a while ago, and we said, our district's gone through a lot of changes, and we know that there's a lot of data and research that ties effective board governance to higher performing student programs. And since that is the business of our district, is to provide the optimal circumstances that we can for our students, we thought it would be incumbent upon us to participate in an ongoing kind of continuous process of improvement and board development. So we were lucky enough, Dr. Hope was kind enough to work with us to be our board coach. We've done some kind of exciting and meaningful work with him so far, and you're going to see the outcome of that work this evening in just a moment. So the 2 pieces, well, the piece that we'll start with this evening is a review of our collective board commitments. Now, we've had board norms, like that's nothing new. There have been iterations of those through previous boards. What we decided to do with our collective commitments was to really raise the bar for ourselves and kind of establish a permanent culture of continuous improvement through these collective commitments. So in addition to like adhering to like just sort of like the obvious norms of like the work that we do together and the professionals that we bring to the table, we wanted to establish this kind of culture of continuous. Not only for, for our functionality as a board and just to set a high expectation for functionality of the district and to help to bring us all up and move us forward. So that is the culture that we've sought to work through. And did I forget anything before we get started? Awesome. Well then, great. I'm going to turn it over if you want to introduce yourself and take over.
Yeah, I've met Brian and Joanne, so this is great that you're able to join tonight, get a jump start on the work that this board has done. This board has made the commitment to engage in a series of discussions over time to enhance its performance. And this is driven not because of poor performance, it's just driven by a continuous improvement belief that any group, when it gets together, can be better. And I have worked with many boards of education in the upper Midwest. Some have a reputation as being extremely high performing, and they still raise their hand and say we can get better. And other boards have had histories of less than admirable performance, let's put it that way. And they too have raised their hand and said we can get better. I have no data at this point to say where you fit in that continuum, but the commitment to work as a group, an intact group, and strive to perform at a higher level is admirable. And I think we had our first meeting, I believe, in December, where we got together and talked about board development, why now, et cetera. And we started to use some data to focus on ways to improve. Tonight, the school perception survey, which reflects the 7 existing board members' perception. This will be another piece of data that we will likely use and have a discussion about what does this tell us and what is being handed around now, the document that reads board collective commitments draft, is essentially a document that captures what the existing board felt were commitments that each individual could make to each other. And if these commitments are acted on, it will lead to a higher performing board. And as Megan says, there is good data out there that says the performance of a board does impact the performance of students in the district. So in and of itself, it's a desirable outcome, good board performance, but it's a bonus knowing that impacts student performance. So we went through an exercise over a couple of meetings where we basically said, well, I started out with a premise, which is that there's really no such thing as group behavior. What we're really talking about is that all behavior results from decisions of actions of individuals. And so when you look at a group, you ask the question, what are the commitments the individuals are willing to make to each other when they get together to do their business? And what are the behaviors and processes that each group feels will enhance their performance? Now, this is different than norms of collaboration, because we know there's certain behaviors that every group needs to exhibit individually, such as paraphrasing, listening carefully, asking clarifying questions, and so on. But what you see before you here is this group's beliefs and commitments. And the document you have in front of you, we believe, captures the updates that the existing boards put together on this last time. So this is before us in the form and for the purpose of saying, is everybody committed to these behaviors? And if so, you basically will adopt them, not formally, but informally, as a working board, saying these are the things we will commit to, and we will on occasion evaluate how well we think we've been doing on these commitments. So I'll stop all the background stuff, but I wanted to give the two of you a context for this and a reminder for the rest of us, since it's been a while since we started this journey. I captured some of the friendly amendments that were made by this group February-ish. What's that? Yeah. And Megan had taken notes also, and we believe that this document captures the changes that were offered by this group after the initial draft. So, Megan, since you were working with this, maybe just make a couple of comments if you think is appropriate. And we open it up for questions for clarification and to change that word draft to final.
Right, so if we could just, before we go any further, do either of you have any questions or thoughts at this point? Just gonna give a space real quick.
No, I glanced through some of these and I think everything in here speaks to good etiquette and decorum and it works through group discussion, so I don't
Where is this going to go on boards? So I would say.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So I just want to know if this board's attempt to always be better. Where was this at 3 or 4 years?
If you look, and I can't remember if I attached it to board docs or not, but there is in our library, and when we do kind of our onboarding, I'll point out to where it lives, point out to you where it lives in board docs, but there is a thing in there that says board norms. So there was already always a document.
Like rules like this.
And you can kind of, and you'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at it after we finish our work with Drew, and you can kind of see how it's evolved. And it's not that we don't still want to have, just like, like every group, right, has and should have meeting norms. What makes this different and what's made our just recent work just with this board different is that intentional critical self-reflective space and aspiration toward continuous improvement, which is something that, to my knowledge, has not existed at least at recent iterations of previous boards.
One of the other things I would say is one of the things we talked about and coming to our work with Drew is that we wanted to ensure, you think of each elected board as like different teams. And then there's an election and then the team members change. So, we have different human beings coming and going. And in our district, we've had times when people didn't finish their full terms. And we're not so much wanting to be focused on what our past has been like, but to the question, because we're all lawyers, is that, the performance of our board, even the dynamics of individuals working together, and that when I ran, it was not something I didn't like what I was seeing. And so I think that together, those that were on the board and those that have come on the board, we've made the commitment towards what do we need to do to solidify the 7 of us working together with our superintendent so things can move forward. In some of my work and training, look at the superintendent and the school members together as a team, and people are coming and going, and even in places and situations where everything is great, what about when something happens, things are not great? So with our commitment to work with Drew and to work on these, knowing that we would have new board members because there's elections, is that what we were trying to do, I think collectively, is let's begin the path of we know how to resolve things as Beloit as we sit down at a table and we work together, because that's the future that we want for our school district, that we have an effective school board, we have an effective superintendent, and the things that are happening in the buildings can happen because the adults that have been elected will actually sit down and talk with each other with respect and work on those things. So that's kind of that's the direction that we've all tried to take and move ourselves to in terms of like Mike said about what best practices are, what the people who are successful, what are they doing? that is that space. So what I would like, and what I think that we're at, is that in our community, the types of things that have happened before, when we sit down and do board development, we'll actually sit down and talk about certain things that happen. And that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So that lingering frustrations and festering of things don't happen because people are trying to do these things. And now that you two have been elected and you'll be sworn in, but we were intentional, we wanted the people who got elected to come sit down at the table with us as soon as possible to start adding to this, because we're gonna be in this together.
And I'll just say briefly, for me, the most important thing, because a lot of people agree to a lot of things, but when we get off course, like I trust the people sitting at the table enough that Greg can say, Amy, you're a little off course on number 5. And I cannot freak out after hearing that and say, you know what, Greg, thank you. I see where you're coming from. And then make the adjustment and move on. So that for me, that's the most important thing, is that we can hold each other accountable to what we said we agree to, and not just agree to stuff and then go do your own thing and it's destructive.
Did you wanna jump?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, and kind of building off being that Sean was saying about having a new team with new team members, is we're trying to codify what we're thinking about a culture of the board and the board superintendent team. And then as new individuals come on, it's like, here's what our culture is, and then what's your contribution to that culture? Because the idea is, we've had a lot of turnover, right? Right now, we're sitting here with a board member who's served a full term and got reelected, and so that's the tenure. I'm beating the tenure of probably the past 7 people who sat in this chair, so we've changed the culture. We want a culture that allows for consistency, longevity, and with that longevity, we build more culture, but we have to start somewhere. As people have said, the waves were at 11 feet, they're down to about 4 feet. It's not calm water yet, we still got a lot of work to do and a lot of hard work to do. But this is our first foray into forging a new path and a new identity for us that is counter to what other people have tried to peg us with. And so I think this is really good work, and I think that a lot of good conversation and thought. And you know what? As Amy has said, we're all going to have differences of opinion, but we are putting our ideas out there on the table so that the best ideas come forward. And the only way that the best ideas come forward is if we can trust each other enough that despite what other people might think, they might think we're at each other's throats, but we feel comfortable and confident that the conversation is productive and it's leading to good outcomes. And as long as we feel that way, the rest is as what I call the whirlwind, right? And we're the calm inside that whirlwind, trying to move the work forward.
Greg, just want to
No, the collective commitments is something that it hasn't been in previous boards. And we spent quite a few hours doing a variety of things and talking about and debating what they need to look like and how to wordsmith so that everything that we said made sense, to try to incorporate everybody's ideas in these commitments. If we follow them, we're going to be the board that this district needs to be, to change the entire culture of this district and move it forward. It's just.
So let me suggest, from a process perspective, I'm going to start with you, Greg. I'm going to ask that Greg read the first one. So we read it, we hear it. And then Sean's going to read the second one. We'll around the horn so the board members and current perspective all have a chance to do one of those. And then we'll just open it up for any comments, friendly amendments, et cetera. And then we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Okay, good. Student academic success and well-being is the primary focus of the board. We commit to providing necessary supports for the administration that center on high expectations for equitable student achievement for every child. John?
We demonstrate professionalism and respect for other board members, the superintendent, and the district staff by adhering to timelines and deadlines and adequately preparing for all meetings. Board members will be fully prepared for all meetings and ready to share ideas, discuss, and conduct business.
John?
Commit to respect discourse on each item as needed to honor the individual's voice on the board and lift up concerns we have heard from the community members. We further commit to assuming positive intent and not centering ourselves by leaning into uncomfortable conversations that will produce growth.
Board members are clear on the decision they're being asked to make. We have on-topic, robust, and respectful discussion. We make the discussion or the decision, and then each board member supports the decision of the board, even if it doesn't align with their personal vote.
That's right.
The board commits to operate ethically by embracing accountability with integrity and transparency. We agree to approach the district business with an open mind, and we acknowledge that positions may evolve based on new ideas or information.
Board members should make appropriate arrangements with administration to visit and spend time in school buildings, observing students and teachers. They should be approachable to the community and support innovative ways to increase family involvement.
Board development is a cornerstone of School District of Beloit Board of Education practice. We use board development to help us focus on issues and determine our collective position. Development activities will be open to candidates as appropriate.
The observations or friendly amendments based on what you read and have heard.
This is more of the, we further commit to assuming positive intent and not centering ourselves by leaning into uncomfortable conversations that will produce growth. Is that supposed to be what not to produce growth? Is that about the conversation or what is that?
It's awkwardly phrased. What the intended message there is that we're going to assume positive intent and that we're willing to lean into uncomfortable conversations, and that like even if we're not comfortable with it is maybe like kind of what we're going after there. I'm comfortable with removing the and not centering ourselves piece if we all agree it's implied, or maybe moving a clause to the end to make it more clear.
Yeah, I just think that last part, I wasn't sure, like the word not was missing or what did that mean?
Like,
That means we're supposed to have, you know, we're key.
yeah, we're all good at it. We wanna put, yeah, because that produces growth.
So then we gotta pick something. It's not right.
That's what I read. I was wondering if I had the knots.
Well, that's all right. Yeah.
So if we read it as we further commit to assuming positive intent and, you know, and lean into uncomfortable conversations that will produce growth. I mean, it's kind of implied that we're not centering on ourselves, because like if we were, then we would be uncomfortable going into the.
I can accept that. I just think I think something was missing.
Okay, what was your problem with the way it's currently stated? Like not centering ourselves. Like I'm not gonna make Amy the focal point of the discussion. I'm gonna keep student achievement and whatever it is that we're discussing, the centerpiece of the conversation.
We further commit to assuming positive intent and not centering ourselves by leaning. So the way it's written, I thought it says that we will not lean into, by not centering ourselves, by leaning into uncomfortable conversations. So it's written, it's a little awkward. I didn't understand.
We're gonna.
I thought it needed to mean something different, like clarify.
What if we say, and I'm not getting rid of this, let's keep the clauses in limbo right now, but could we also, just because it's a bit of a long sentence or it's also confusing, could we just start a new sentence and we will lean into uncomfortable conversation that will produce growth?
Right, that's fine. That works.
Do you want, are we okay with removing clause, or would you like to see us with the clause?
I could catch your pitch. I yield to more of a body.
Okay, so we're gonna omit the centering ourselves clause, because we're in consensus that it's implied, and then we're gonna start a new sentence there. We will, or we commit to leaning into uncomfortable conversation that will produce growth. So those are two separate ideas, a little bit more clear. Beautiful, thank you.
You're capturing this. Any others that need clarification?
I'm good.
I just, I'm good also. I just wanted to make sure with number 6, I just don't want it to be confusing where it says observing students and teachers. This number 6 was the hardest one for me to edit because I had like 7 layers of notes and so did Drew, and I was like, I'm just gonna like throw some spaghetti at the wall with number 6 and see what lands. So I just, and this final read here, I wanna make sure, because observing can have it like an institutional understanding and like a
We're not
casual
gonna
understanding.
evaluate.
We're not, it's like a non-evaluative, so I was just wondering, do we wanna change that verb from observing to something else? Because I want to capture the intent, which I think more or less we're on the same page of it. It just says board members should make appropriate arrangements with administration to visit and spend time in school buildings. We're there to like
Period.
see what's happening. Yeah, and we just let's get rid of that whole clause. Clause is done.
6 with that. It's a priority for us to be involved.
And to be visible, right? Everybody
So
good with
I'm
that?
hearing buildings, period, scratch observing students and teachers. So what you got? Is that okay? Great.
I got a question about number 3.
Yes, sir.
Something again, did not they have the community, there it is, board and lift up concerns? Do we still have a lot of individuals who come to the meeting and just speak about what they don't like?
So people will reach out to us individually too, like people are gonna come up to you and say, listen, I'm concerned. Yeah, right, and so what you would do, so like if there's something that, you know, like you, so in that circumstance, right, someone's like, hey, listen, I've got a problem with X. You're either able to say, oh, hey, just go talk to, so you're either able to like diffuse and redirect like right there and be like, cool, or you're like, you know what? That's a really, you know, this needs to be discussed as board, and then you would, you know, use the appropriate channels to bring, if it is board business, then you bring it to board business, and that's how we uplift those concerns. Most of the time, just in my own experience, when people come here like, hey, it's more like, hey, let me direct you to the chain of command, like who's gonna solve that problem for you. It's usually, but there are absolutely times when people are like, hey, X, and they're like, yeah, X, and then we kind of like bring it up through, you know, we'll talk more about how to do that later. Cool.
Any other further amendments?
I think we're ready to shift draft to final.
Okay, good. Greg, you good with it?
I'm good.
Sean?
More than
And Joanne?
Good.
Sir?
Yep.
Amy?
Ready?
Great.
Alright.
Thank you.
I don't know. Sorry.
Don't apologize. No,
Ask all of them.
So, will this go out to students? It's like, it's something when the publicize that this is what we're doing.
That's a great question. Dr. Kaiser, what are your thoughts?
Well, definitely it's gonna live within our libraries on Board Docs. We had not talked about how to communicate this out, so that, I think that is a good conversation for us to have.
are you in support of that happening?
Absolutely. And being a new board member, and I'll get a lot of the bad stuff. I would love to go out and say, look, what we're doing. Look, they're.
We're all getting great copies of this.
We know.
Well, so this is the thing, and I appreciate the conversation that opened up this. We did this before anybody even got elected. So you know what I'm saying, that don't work.
I'm just talking, right.
I know. But the purpose is, the work is already in place,
Yeah.
the seeds, so.
You get to walk into.
Yeah.
But what you said is important, because even though it's been done, there are things that we are doing, and they're small steps, but they are steps that lead us to a place where, you know, we're not trying to be all over, hey, look at us, what we're doing too. But you need to communicate what you are doing.
I think it's really good, and I think that the verbiage and what it sounds like, it's like something we have, to be honest, never seen before from a school board.
I think the idea here is we're holding ourselves accountable, that's the point, right? And I think the best way to be accountable is to write it down and then to share it with the people that can hold you accountable, right? So I get the idea of sharing that with whoever can hold us to that.
think on our district webpage, when we have board information, all our cute little photos come up, that is one place to have it reside. But, you know, however, if our communications director and the superintendent, we think would be best, I think it would be wholly appropriate to let people know this is what we've committed to, and then the document can reside.
As a heads up to a later discussion, one thing that we talked about a while ago when we met was using these opportunities with Drew to carve out space at the end to kind of say like, so how did things go this month? Like, what are some highs? What are some things we could have maybe done differently? Just kind of practice that reflection. And one idea, based on some feedback I've gotten from community members about like, hey, you have all this like secret amazing stuff that's happening. Why is it a secret? We could kick around ideas for how to like take that time to like produce some sort of like here's our highlights. You know, I just think that there is, not for this maybe right now, but I think there's some space in our work with Drew to work on that communication, that purposeful communication out to the community about the wonderful work that we are doing.
I like the idea of the board webpage, and then when we get a final draft of the final commitments, put it in my next newsletter that goes out, because we get a lot of readership on that.
And thank you for that work.
That whole idea of framing it as, you know, continuous improvement. And then that plan to check X cycle, we will check. We will, on occasion, with discipline, ask ourselves to assess our performance over the last quarter, or 6 months, whatever you want to do. And we can figure out a process by which we can say, we're really doing a great job on this one, but I think we're struggling a little bit on this one. Let's talk about it.
And we had discussion on even months or off months that we would do a self-evaluation, and not like a huge thing, because everyone has a ton of things to do, but like 20 minutes at the end of the meeting,
Yes,
we do that pulse check, and it's like, all right, this is where we nailed it. All right, we could have done this better.
And
I
there's
think
always going to be that,
Yeah,
right?
the revisiting of that is really gonna make this come alive.
Yeah, just for so what you started. So when Dr. Keyser and I went to a conference last summer, and that's where some of this conversation came from, and it's kind of this journey. And we had kicked around the idea of on even months, giving some informal, like kind of like, you know, check the pulse with our superintendent and give some feedback and just say, hey, how are we doing on our stuff, right? And then on the odd months, doing that with ourselves and saying, hey, how are we doing in our document? Hey, I think we're rocking 1 and 2, but you know, I've noticed lately we're kind of, here's some things that I think we should talk about. That's what not saying we have to stick to that, but that was the original, kind of the genesis of that idea, so.
Great, good work. Our second agenda item, my involvement, is, I think, a very timely one, particularly to talk about issues and situations that tend to come up within a school year, sometimes multiple times. And the importance of an understanding of who, I'll use the term, owns those situations. And the worksheet that you have in front of you, and it looks like most of you are looking at it right now, is lists a lot of situations or issues that tend to come up. And one of the reasons why there is less than productive relationships between a board and a superintendent is because there is lack of clarity about who owns these things. And so the expression you sometimes will hear is stay in your lane, right? You hear that? Stay in your lane. And this is a good example of being clear about whose lane is it. And sometimes you swim in the lane together, right? And so that's why this worksheet, which we're going to go through using our good friend, the Post-it notes behind me, we are going to determine, is this owned, and do we look to the board for that? Do we look to the superintendent for that, or do we do this together? And we're gonna find a home for each of these 27-ish or so situations. And we're gonna ask at the end of this, are there other situations that come to mind that this group would benefit from identifying? Okay? You with me on the intent? Yeah. Okay. So here's a process that I think is efficient, and will enable us to have a document that will clarify your agreement, this board's agreement on whose lane these things are in. And we're gonna basically put them in one of three categories. How do we do it? So I'm gonna start by asking somebody to raise their hand and say, I will take, and since there's so many of them over here, these in my little system, C3. And I believe that it is owned by the board, or that is owned by the superintendent, or that is something we do together. And if we all agree with that person, we go shake our heads. And if you go, let's say more about that. I saw that a little differently, and we'll talk it through. You with me? Okay, real simple. So who would like to begin? And let's start off with some low hanging fruit. Go.
Let's complicate it as possible. I'm just kidding. Let's do F1 together.
F1, determining what items are on the board agenda. And Megan is saying that that is something we do together.
Thank you. Dan, is your favorite color green?
Yes, it is.
Alright, I gave you green, I gave us purple, and since we do together. What number was that leaving?
That's 25.
Alright,
Okay, we did that together. And by the way, let me just point out that Joanne and Brent, when we got together, we decided we were gonna go on first name basis when we're in our professional development kind of exercise. So that's why I'm not,
Mr. Winfield.
so I'm not dissing respect here,
No,
but
no,
calling
it's
you
just-
your first name. Yeah. All right, we're okay with that? First one, excellent. All right. Who would like to choose another one? Yes,
F2,
F2,
that's the board.
evaluating the superintendent.
That's 30.
Whose responsibility is that?
That's the board.
Okay.
Are we doing the things now or later? Well, the comments.
No, if you don't agree with anything, you say, I need to talk about that.
Do you disagree with that?
No, I agree from the sense of like, it's the responsibility of some of us to complete the document, to move forward in that sense. But in our process, and even how it's written in our policy, it is something that
It's
we bring
collaborative.
to, it's a collaborative, together thing. But I understand what
The ultimate accountability.
Not agree.
Yeah, right. Ultimately, the accountability, so process aside, because of course, yeah, right.
Because I understand that there's going to be sensitive, if people don't feel that you're not part of this.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
we assume positive intent.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna take 14 on my list, which is C2, evaluating staff. And in my world, that is green because that is Dan.
You not always have.
So this is the Amy's saying this is the superintendent's job. This is not the board's job.
I agree.
Fully agree.
And so let me also clarify, when we say superintendent, it doesn't mean that Dan will be evaluating all staff, right? I mean, we know he's got a lot of time on his hands. A lot of time on his hands.
No pressure.
But it means he is responsible for making sure this happens. And his degree of involvement is his choice in working with the group. But we have,
Great clarification.
all right, we're good there for evaluating staff under superintendent. A4.
Number one.
Interviewing teacher candidates.
That should be a superintendent.
Okay, so Spencer's saying A4 is the superintendent's job. Are we okay with that?
Yep.
We are on a roll. Who's up?
Why would they get-
Right.
I'll do number 7, which is A5. We're gonna give that to Dan.
Deciding which computer hardware to purchase.
Unless it's over $100,000, was it $100,000?
And you gotta change out $100,000.
No, this,
No, if it's over $100,000.
That comes to the board for approval.
well,
Can we put like a little asterisk on that?
But I bring the I would
Yeah,
agree
that's
that
what we-
the decision as far as the recommendation
Yeah.
on what that I would say on that, but I agree that approval of that comes to the.
Yeah.
comes to the board.
But we don't want to get board members going, well, I think the IBM is better than the
Right.
Dell system, so, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like,
Honestly, ENIAC is coming back, so. And anyone who knows what ENIAC is,
yeah, not me.
it is the old punch card computer from 19 whatever.
I mean, let's be honest, you buy 5 iPads, they're probably over 100,000 anyways.
All right, I just dated myself.
All right, who's up?
Sir, please.
Go ahead.
Oh, if you're gonna jump in, you gotta know which one.
Approving staff hires,
I think these is 19.
Thank you.
and you believe it's which one?
That's.
Okay. Approving staff hires,
I'm
I'm gonna say that's both
Both, yeah.
Together.
okay?
in sequence.
Okay.
Well, it's not both hearings.
Well, they bring the recommendations and then we approve.
Okay, so,
I agree with Amy on that, but I would say it's together because I'll bring recommendations to the HR committee because they highlight our board policies that board approves additional hires.
right, this one is activities where it's okay to involve, because
There's
that's
no
learning.
Yeah.
Learn how to, yeah.
Yes.
So they make all, so they interview.
Yeah, but the bulk is definitely the administration.
Yes, yeah. We're not out like recruiting.
Amy, you had one.
Oh, okay. Establishing budget priorities. On this is 3. Thank you. A1, that's both.
Agreed as well. That's the way I always like to.
And that's done at least once a year, right?
Ongoing process.
But you start off the year, say, these are our priorities, this is how we're gonna spend, this is how we're gonna execute. Doesn't mean you don't make changes, you do, but it's, okay. So this is a together process, right, Amy?
Yes.
We okay with that, everyone?
I think they could place on the committee too.
Better together.
All right. All right, who's, Sean, you're up.
Number 29,
Which is,
on the investigate, I didn't look at the top board, investigating students. Thank you.
sorry, D,
D5.
investigating student discipline concerns.
Right, yeah, that is the superintendent.
Superintendent's job, right?
Investigation of that.
Or his designee.
Or in the moving, right, that's standard, but it's not a job of the 7 board. I'm gonna, while I'm doing it, I'm gonna take,
Actually,
28, let's put 28, investigating staff members.
Okay.
So when this conduct really was, that the investigation belongs to the superintendent, not the board members.
Yeah, a shadow.
Because in the end, whether it's, if it's a student investigation or even personnel things, those are things that at the end of certain processes, they need to approve the board. So we're not at the
So we need to
beginning.
be impartial. Since when we actively keep the information from us.
Right, so we don't know anything about the personnel stuff.
So that's about the agreement.
Yes, yes, you should. We all should.
Okay.
I will take
Dan.
B2, which is number 24, interviewing the admin candidates. That is my responsibility.
Interviewing administrative candidates to hire, superintendent's responsibility, that's the lane. Yeah.
Yes. I'm gonna jump in with 23, deciding bus pickup and drop off locations. and
That's the,
we're getting that
that's the board's job, right?
That is not the board. That is the superintendent or designee.
Right.
Number 23.
So that's an example. I doubt if Dan gets too involved with that, hopefully, but he makes sure that happens.
Yes.
All right.
I'll go with E1, which is number 21, responding to complaints about taxes. I'll own that one.
We appreciate that.
You gonna take that one?
So Dan's saying he wants to own that?
I mean, you
Well, we
can,
put
but
this together.
Yeah.
I feel like it's together because like it's a community facing issue. Like, I feel like I would feel irresponsible if someone was like, Megan, I need to talk to you about taxes. Sorry, talk to Dan.
I mean, I think I would slap it in the together space, and it's to understand that the exact school finance, and the specific situation for our district, that is something that Dan will provide more detail to.
Absolutely.
The higher level view of what we did or did not do in the approval of our mill rates,
Right.
that's the space where we come from. But, people are holding tax bills and saying, this went up. And you're the cause of it, it's a
Right, like you have to be able to intelligently be able to respond to that. I wholeheartedly agree that like, that is, if you want the details, talk to Dr. Keyser, but here's like just the high level.
And that's how I was reading. I was looking at the higher perspective of saying like, this is the reason why we set the mill rate where we did. So from that standpoint and talking about, that, I can see together. But getting the phone call like, my taxes just went up, you said X, and my taxes, walking someone through that, and send them to the business office,
Yes, sir.
we'll walk through that.
No complaints here.
And prime example too is like, I asked you about doing training in the business operations finance committee twice a year, talking about school finances. And so that if people are watching, they get a little bit of that lesson of like, oh, like, so like our committee is actually kind of taking a stance on it and trying to help explain things because I don't know about you guys, but I'm not an expert in school finance. And I would take every opportunity I can learn it.
So the home is to get it. Okay.
I think the other part too, in the together lane, some of the work that we do is learning like what part is our part and what is the baton part to pass to the
Yeah.
other person. Because there's sometimes it requires when staff members, well, not staff members, but community members are writing things, there's a response that they're waiting from the board in terms of what is the fullness of the response that we can give them. And then the handoff to Dr. Keyser and the administration to get that part of the answer.
Greg, it looks like you're ready for something.
Just looking at, I was gonna go with E4, advocating with legislators. I think that's the other. I think we both have a responsibility for that.
Yeah. So I can go together too. I think that, for us, one of the things that we talk about as a board is, as one of seven, that's your individual opinion, but coming up with collective positions where we're making a statement on the school district of Deloitte, this is what we believe, whether it's 4-3, 5-2, 6-1, or 7-0, that we have to make collective action. And then sometimes too, as we have decided a position where we are at and taken action on that, then that is the position that the superintendent is authorized to speak for. In that space, sometimes, and even too for Dan, if it was an issue where the board was sharply divided and he just weighs out on his own, then, he could be on the wrong side of where the board actually ended up. That would be a different space. But together, we're working together to gain those spaces for ourselves.
So there's alignment, there's consistent messaging. People know where the Beloit School District stands on whatever the issue is.
So I'm gonna jump in with 8, setting annual goals for the school district.
Okay.
And that is both.
Setting annual goals for the school district. Amy's saying this is a together.
And I would say a good example of that would be why we're doing the strategic planning process, because that is our collective, story gathering from our community, and then the board ultimately voting on a strategic plan sets that multi-year plan, so then we can evaluate it. And then within that, I can take it from there.
Good.
That's great. Great example.
I'll jump back, I think we got a pair of them together, addressing complaints from teachers and about teachers, 17 and 18.
E1 and was
C5. I think we're gonna look at both language hands. Purview.
Addressing complaints about teachers, addressing complaints from teachers. Superintendent? Yep.
I feel like it depends on what the complaint is from teachers though. But I would largely agree with that. I mean, it's like, it depends, like, are the teachers complaining to us about something that's like a foreign policy issue?
There's complaints that come from teachers about what administration is doing. And then there's a space that, like I said, is what is properly in the work of superintendent and administrators.
Right,
Sometimes what people will do is people try to work around different processes.
right.
And so what we try as a board is not to get in that space.
Redirect. Yeah.
Redirect.
Right.
And then addressing complaints about teachers, parents will bring us complaints about specific issues, but since we're not the people on the front line who will discipline or correct that behavior, that's something that we end up referring to Dan. So we will sometimes we'll be the first space. It'll come to us, and then the response is, we need to lead them back to the appropriate resolution. And I think that that's something in the complaint resolution process, and understanding where those things need to go, because it's not for me to take on an individual complaint about a teacher at one school, go knock on a door and start talking to people. That's, so that's, I would put it in together. That's to me, I would put that in that together space between where we need to know what our rules is in that together, because it comes to us sometimes before it even comes to the superintendent, because he's not always included on the emails that come to us about those things.
But for me, it's the addressing it. So it can come to me, but we're either the final hearing body or we're not involved. So I don't take the redirection, like, hey, you need to speak to this person. If it's not resolved, then you can have a conversation with this person. I don't count that as addressing it. That's just telling you who you need to talk to. I love that that is taped to your head.
And with the addressing,
Yes.
clarification, I totally agree with you. That's the superintendent.
And I would agree, I would say it's addressing it in my lane, because even Megan, to your point, if the complaint from the teacher is a policy issue, we've already established that together we're addressing board agenda items. So you might say, hey Dan, I know this came to the board and you're addressing it, but do you think this might be something we should put on the board? And then that could be a separate discussion.
Right, nope, that's a great point, totally agree.
Good. Joanne.
Here to help.
Number 22, I think is F. Read, responding to requests for new program.
I'd say that's probably it together, because like a lot of people are gonna make us things like, because we're gonna have a say
Are
on
we
it.
talking about like already established programs? Or, I mean, it says new.
It's a request for something new that has.
Okay, backers.
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah, so you can, parents come in and say, we need to offer Mandarin language, right? I'm just, oh, okay, that's interesting. So what do you do with that suggestion? How do you?
I've been.
See, I see that as both, because like when new programming, like new clubs and activities come, those always require board approval. So the expertise for it typically lies within the administration, but then that comes to us for approval. And what was the other one that because it comes to us for approval, we put down so that's why I would see that as both.
I'm gonna focus on response.
Okay,
And I think that equally, the superintendent and the board can respond, people start with either one of us about that issue.
so it's different from addressing,
Yes.
responding, language matters.
What
I
do you,
think all continuous improvement that those people are thinking about want to offer that.
Yeah,
what do you think, Dan?
I see the responding as something, that is in my lane because of the fact that, let's take Mandarin. Someone comes in and says we need Mandarin. We might not have, there might be a whole host of things that need to happen in order for that to actually occur. And so responding to the request thoughtfully and not say, not now or not ever, or yep, next year, has to start with the administration. And then I agree, the process has to come up through the board for final approval, but responding to that initial request, I think has to be directed towards the superintendent.
would you, and I don't disagree with that, would you feel the same way if the request was not academic in nature? So if someone came and said, we want to have a new program in the community, and it's not academic, it's something else.
Something like.
Is it a similar process? So let's say we want to have student-only listening sessions twice a year. That's a new program we want to establish in the community. Does it change if it's not centered in academics, or is for you, is that the same process?
I would say that's a really good one because when I look at it from a new program that is going to impact programming and staffing and budgets, for us, yes, but if it is a community conversation around something that isn't going to impact staffing, budget, and all that, I'm open to that. I think that could be a both. Student listening, saying we want the school district to be a part of community student listening sessions twice a month.
So-
I can get behind that.
Like to clarify then, almost kind of like the opposite of this last one we just talked about, like depending on the nature of it, like any of us can like respond, at least that superficial, like, you know, let me, you know, kind of like just to acknowledge in terms, like, are we talking about responding in terms of acknowledging and charting a course for action, but that course for action, I think is largely gonna land on administration, because most of the work, I would think, that people ask for new programming is gonna have like that time and budget and resources and academic expertise from administration, right? It just kind of depends on how we're defining response, because I'm inclined to say together, as long as there's kind of this collective understanding that like, if it requires any like district resources, then it's still gonna be largely by administration.
That's a together space, just because I think it takes a superintendent and the board all together. If it was initiated by the board, or if it was initiated by the superintendent, we're both going to end up in that space where like that thing that is not happening to happen is going to take the collaboration of us together.
I agree.
But I like the clarification that you
Yes.
brought up about resources, staffing, budgets, et cetera.
Yeah,
Or not do it. That's the space where it's like.
I think it's gonna be the handoff, kind of, this is my
It is.
portion, and then I'm gonna pass it to you, and it might come back to me, but yeah.
because if, how, and when depend on administrative knowledge, expertise, resources, et cetera.
If I do them together,
So I'm hearing
That
I
is
think we can get to together.
good discussion.
B2,
All right,
B2,
B2,
Jolene,
developing
it's
a
Spencer, I don't
corrective
remember.
number 9, performance plan for a staff member.
that's
That's Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta go.
That would go under 30 evaluation.
Right.
Right, A2, authorizing staff positions for hire.
That's the board.
Creating a position.
Which one? Authorizing staff positions.
Yeah, the authorizing.
Authorizing.
Okay. Next one.
For directing staff discipline, which is 20.
Direct staff discipline.
Or in
What would you like to say? Superintendent?
correct?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Dan, are you looking at this? Yeah, man, there's a lot of responsibilities now.
Okay, you're green, we're purple, and we're both pink. I'm visual.
I'll throw one more on Dan's list as long as he wants some.
Yeah.
27, which would be D3,
Yep.
he can determine vendors.
This is why I need staff.
What is left?
Okay, so I'm just gonna comment on that. Because it's determining and not approving. See, that's why language matters, because a lot of these, like the board has a hand in it, but that determining, absolutely, Dan and the administration.
But like, just to
Find that
clarify,
out in committee meetings.
Right.
Vendors say what would have been, why we selected this one.
right, but ultimately we approve that final vendor. So they'll make a recommendation and, you know, usually we,
B4?
Before,
Before what?
establish some goals for the staff development program.
That's 11.
Thank you, sir.
That would be a superintendent.
Establishing goals for the staff development program. Yep.
Yep.
Alright, good to go.
I'm gonna go one below that. B5, which was 12, establishing student discipline policies. Here I'll focus on the last word in there. That's gonna be- I'm gonna say that's gonna be a together, but ultimately it's the board who approves policy.
Yeah, because what do we mean by establishing? That's a really good point. Because when we did so the code of conduct, when we revisited that, it was a committee of staff and board. But then ultimately it's approved by, policy is ultimately the responsibility of the board, which is why I'm inclined to just check out the board.
Is establishing different than approving?
But yeah, I think so.
I think, I will go with that one as,
You would
like,
ask
a general
for it.
basic thing, it's like policies, we're approving policies, like. Here's my example.
One example.
We have policies about fighting in school. So for people to say that they don't care what happens in the board, that board does not care about fighting in schools.
We have policy.
We have policies. None of us at this table that are board members are the principals who can hand out discipline and days for the violation of those policies. The 7 of us that are elected board members, we're not the principals of the school. So when the student violates that code of conduct, that policy, we don't decide the discipline, whether they get suspended 1 day, 5 days, no days.
We don't implement.
We don't implement that.
Six conversations.
So we set
But we
policy.
set the expectation though,
Policy's there.
right?
Policy.
The person at the building is not following the policy.
Because the board does care that there is or isn't fighting against schools, by the policies there.
The place where it might come is like in the end, if we have to expel students, we're expelling them based on the violation of those policies.
Right.
But that has to come to us. So we have created the policies that are necessary for an orderly learning climate. And it's a together process of our community, our parents and our students and our administrators that implement those policies where that learning environment that we want takes place. That the policy establishing that can go to the board.
So, yeah, okay, because I was gonna say it was together for the establishing, but policy is approved at the board level, so.
All right, what's next?
So we're going with board for 12, establishing student discipline policies.
That's number 15, which number, C3.
C3, develop
Yes.
Thank you.
crisis communications plan,
That would be superintendent.
establishing a crisis communication plan.
Right, because we don't need one for the board because we have our collective commitment.
That's our crisis plan.
So we will not need a board crisis communications.
I think that, let's say with that one, in the sense of what that is but when we have emergency situations, that our superintendent is communicating with our board, and there's certain actions that we are.
That's the execution of it.
All right, 15. Deciding which teacher or principal candidate to hire.
He's a superintendent.
That is, yeah.
Oh, 13.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so technically, superintendent and administration
They give you
give
one-
recommendations, but the board decides leaning heavily on the recommendations.
I think that what that.
So deciding which teacher.
Well, and I also, here's where I did differentiate because 13 is deciding and 19 is approving.
Approving, yeah.
So we have 19 as approval of hires, carte blanche, that we said was together, but deciding the candidates to bring forward. That's true.
I would, if it's a deciding who to bring forward, that's a clear superintendent for me, but deciding who to hire, that's the board, because to me, that's a repeat, it's just a rewording of 19 approving staff hires.
So should we put it together?
Well, sometimes you get a repeat unintentionally.
Should we put
That's
it
my
as-
2 cents.
Should we put it as together, similar to what we did with 19?
I think that's the board, because deciding who to hire, that's the board. Deciding who to bring forth as a recommendation, that's the admin.
Let's just edit
Because
another.
yeah, because I think what the prompt
Recommend.
is that who's picking the candidate that's coming forward. And
Okay, that's definitely admin.
So you want to amend this to
Recommend.
Please, sir.
Recommending each teacher.
recommending which
recommend.
teacher or principal candidate to hire is
To recommend.
Which teacher principal that?
to
So
recommend.
you're deciding which
Oh.
teacher to recommend, and then we've got that covered in 19 approving staff hires as a together because of that process.
It's a nice thing we can edit it.
What happened, like I said, then, so the way our committee is structured now, we have a,
Human Resources Committee, yeah.
Committee of the whole,
and it's all 7 of us. So.
committee of the whole,
Committee of the whole, so we make that decision monthly and different employment.
Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly, that's right, I don't know what I'm talking about.
it's all right, it's been a long day.
But that's what we're looking at, the names for positions that have been approved for recommendation, and we approved to hire.
All right, establishing
Policies.
policies for staff evaluation, policies. Which number is that?
That is 16.
Thank you.
Definition of policies, staff evaluation, work.
I'm gonna jump in with 10, approving curriculum changes. That's the board after reviewing recommendations.
Right. And then, yep, we just did that one, so I think we're on board.
5 is the last one.
Number 5,
Approving dollars.
$30 is board.
The board.
Oh, we finally got a few of them in there.
I'd say, it'd be kind of interesting that the last 3 that we did were board responsibility, why didn't you say the same one, Dan's responsibility?
It is. Well, and that's, I really appreciate this individual. Thanks, what, the easier the better. We've established that. Just gotta-
So green is Dan, purple is the board, and pink is together. Dan, you got a big job.
And we appreciate
I
it.
think when we do the collective board, I'll take this and this, I think would be the. Say this is an exercise that we did, and here's the commitment that we made.
Follow our checkmarks.
Because, similar to how we were talking about how we read 13, deciding and then switching to recommending to make it clear for us. I can absolutely see another group in another community having different outcomes based on the exact same language.
Oh, sure.
And that, just to build off of that, I've worked with 20-ish so boards doing this exercise. I do not believe 2 of them are the same.
That's what I was gonna ask. Can you give us your reflection on how did we do?
Well,
We did great.
of course, it'd be great, And as I think maybe Sean mentioned, it's not about getting it right, it's getting it clear and together understanding the nuances of why we say it's this versus that.
So do we all feel calibrated is the question? Dr. Kelly, we're gonna give you like a
It's okay to
minute.
say no.
This was the review, the test is next week, just
Okay,
kidding, but
that's
are
what
you, Dr. Kaiser, do you feel calibrated with our discussion?
Yeah, because I think that is evidence of how clean the conversation was, and clean's not the right word, but I can't think of a better word at this point.
Chris.
But it was clear, there wasn't contention saying how we felt about it. So I feel it does bring clarity, which to me is always something that I'm striving teams to do, is be very clear about what is it that we're trying to accomplish. But here, I think this gives us a good roadmap to simply say, similar to what we said about the commitments. We can come back to this and say, how are we doing?
I like it.
Everybody needs to answer this.
Snaps are never enough.
So I have two requests. Can we just like a brief, like 30-second intermission? One, can we get this bad boy plugged up? And I'm willing to help with that. And two, I love each of you. Can you not click your pens? And I know that is like a personal request. It is me infringing on you. If you must, I understand. It is simply for, that makes me crazy.
Okay.
The end.
I'm gonna do what I can.
Hey, that's all I can ask for.
Call me on.
No, I won't, because it is your choice. All I can do is make a request. It's all right. Do that. Dan, you're the best. Thank you, sir.
I always put my pen in my pocket, make it a little quicker.
Yes, sir.
Or-
If it happens, it happens. All right.
Thank you. So, are there any other situations that occur to you that might be helpful to kind of work through, either things that have happened and it was like, or things that might be coming up that you wanna?
Well, I think that as far as like things that sometimes it's things that have happened, to give one example. Like a concern in the school building about something a teacher did. No matter what that is, we've already discussed, that investigation has to happen at the superintendent, not the board members. And even if this incident gets a newspaper, we become aware of certain things at the board level. But there's no official action that has been taken, there's nothing that's presented to us. So we're not in a position to make any comment, or we have not had a collective statement or position on it.
And it's not appropriate for us to do so.
Right. I think the issue would be like in moments like that, and just as we have to deal with certain things, is the communication, what communication do we have to our community to explain, these are our processes. And, you know, you're not gonna hear inputs or takes because we're not violating our processes and our policies, that this is how these things would happen.
And I think for us to be proactive about that community education, because Greg brought up a really good point. I have spoken to people that think we're jerks because when they do their public comment, we don't respond. And it's like, no, we can't. We can't engage in discussion on topics that are not publicly posted on our agenda and during that time. So we just need to be, in my opinion, intentional about doing that community education so that it's not in the heat of the moment. It would be nice if we could be proactive. And I know we've discussed, like when we do our listening sessions, we're gonna start with, hey, here's this piece that may not be clear to people who are outside of the board.
And it is changing the culture of the community a little bit, because in the past board, the community would make a complaint to somebody on the board, and the board would then push to take the action, whether that was their position or should be their ability to do that or not, and trying to make sure that the community understands that that's not the board's role. We can communicate that with Dan and make sure he's aware that we've received that communication and he becomes aware of it, but it's not ours to take action on it.
Until it's time for us to take action.
Until it's not, right,
Yeah.
yeah. But initially, it may not be in our role, so what we then need to look at, where does that go to and what happens from that point?
And I would say the kind of that proactiveness, kind of stretching that out is there are instances in my short tenure where community members have tried to take individual board members. And again, trying to say like, well, what do you think? Like trying to, and take something that is in a completely different realm, in a completely different context and say, because you will never now lose the fact that you're a board member. No matter whether you're in Beloit or you're in, Houston, Texas, you're going, someone somewhere is gonna say, wow, I talked to so-and-so and this is what the board thinks, like,
And I think the key to that, like, it's perfectly fine with any board member, and it's encouraged to engage with the community, to have those conversations, to hear what the community needs are. But it's important for us to be clear, like, this is Amy Joyce's position. I am not speaking for the board, or this is, your individual. And then when we speak collectively as a board, that even if that's not my personal opinion, once the board has made a decision, we move forward. So you can have conversations with people and still redirect them to whoever the proper entity is to address it.
Great. Okay. Well, but when situations do come up, you can say, all right, let's just be clear, whose lane is this? And you go through the same kind of discussion. I think this, talk, reach consensus.
Another thing that's come up, like crisis, there are things that happen. And one of the things that, as we have worked together with our superintendent, had to respond to different crises, is that along the way, when new things are happening that not ever happened before, we're gonna pause and reflect and have conversation. I think that we had to respond to an issue in the fall where we had a school closure based off of threats that we had. And that was something new for all of us. And the way that our administrator handled that to keep the board updated, his work with law enforcement, that we're able to support the decisions that he made about what should be done. Even though like I said, there's so many things that as board members, like everyone doesn't have the complete story about what's going on. So their opinions of what does and does not happen and what should happen is somewhat incomplete sometimes. And then, like I said, when you come into as a superintendent sharing information, decisions happen. That's where that's at. I think that that was a new part of learning to work together. That when things are happening that have never happened in your community before, that, okay, as a leadership team, the superintendent of the board, we gotta pause and let's talk about this. Because something is different now, and what is the type of response that's needed from us? What does our community need? So those are different things.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. The last discussion, and this will be brief, is next week at the state convention that WASDA is sponsoring. I'm leading a panel of 3 different school districts talking about their board development journey. There's a series of questions, tell us about what led you to make a commitment to do development activities, what have you accomplished, what has been the results, etc. And Dan and Sean have agreed to be part of that panel. And that's FYI, if you did not know. But the reason I bring it up tonight is an invitation to you. If you would like if you would like them to communicate something to those who attend that meeting. Now, that might be challenging for the two of you since you don't have the history of when it's been accomplished, but it's wide open to anybody. But if there are certain things that you as a board member would like to suggest that one or both of them touch on when we ask them and the two other groups about, what has been the impact, or what have you tried to accomplish? Maybe what's the impact? Impact's harder to measure after you do something, but I just want to throw that open to the group. Dan and Sean will say whatever they will, and they'll confab about this beforehand probably. But they may wish to hear something you would like them to cover.
What is the conference?
So it's the spring superintendent's conference in Elkhart Lake. And so Drew did a similar session at the state convention with three districts. So it's going to be a very similar process. And I sat in that session, and it was very interesting to just hear what was the rationale for it, and they were kind of like what Drew said about this process. No two boards and superintendents had the same reason or rationale, and sometimes they were completely different reasons. But wanted to give an opportunity for the whole group to say, what has this process meant to you? What has it meant? This is your first kind of official board action and kind of onboarding. So how did you two feel coming into something like this? But for the rest of us, what has the journey been this year? And if there's something you would like for Sean and I to make sure we touch upon, we'll want to make sure we give that opportunity.
So that's the 20th.
20.
Yeah, that's awesome. I support it.
Right. It's a few hours. No, I'm looking forward to writing. I mean, and honestly, I think carving out that space to be reflective is really part of the nature of what we're doing. So I think it's a great.
I think it's impressive that we were invited to participate. So.
Yeah, can we like snaps for that? That's my thing tonight.
All right, I support it.
Okay, no,
It's
good.
discussion.
We're special. We're special. Let us be special. Okay.
Well, and I'll tell you, I asked Dan to consider this, because the other districts are smaller, Pulaski and Boston. The other districts, they're just different, let's just put it that way. And they've been doing some things, you're on the kind of the front end of this process. And so I have some little different perceptions than maybe someone who did this 18 months ago or 2 years ago. And the size of the district, the history of the district, I just think of things in different perspective. That's why I extended the invitation, and I'm glad you accepted it. But this idea of being reflective, I think that's one of the things I'm hearing Megan say, is that the whole concept of building in time to reflect upon, and not just focusing on task, decision, stepping back, looking in the mirror before you step.
I think one of the things that is already in my mind was to share, it's just the journey of our district, of people being able to work together and creating that space. Some of the things that we shared about what our board development time could be as we all sit down at a table together to talk. As Rachel was saying, and just other things. I mean, having most recently been a board where with the turnover to superintendents and then the turnover to board members, that thing that we were seeking to do is create a space where we are proactively dealing with conflict. And then also trying to create a space.
And not all conflict is bad.
Right, not all conflict is bad.
Right.
But also to create a space for new board members. There are many things that we have talked about as we were in this process of working ourselves together, that new people are gonna come on the board. And one of the things that I like to say when I'm talking to people is there are some things in our district that many of us agree should change. And, you know, the first 7 steps we'll take together, there's no disagreement. When we get to step number 8, that might be when you think we ought to go left and I think we ought to go right. And even when we get to step 8, we'll take a vote. And that'll be it. And then we'll do the next thing that we need to do. But what has happened, what has been happening in our community is that different reasons people would leave or not finish. And our district was just kind of standstill. So we wanted to create that space and be intentional about creating that space. Because now, it doesn't matter what happened before the election, you're gonna be on this team.
Have that elasticity.
Right, and so like rubber band, you know, you gotta have elasticity in our relationships to be able to talk about those things and be able to move ourselves forward. And the thing that I like is I sit in reflection, when we just made that list, you know, a word that had been thrown around in our past is micromanaging. And
Sorry.
I,
That's how.
I said this.
We are transparent.
I'm saying it like
It's been weaponized because you should not micromanage.
For sure.
But you also should not micromanage. You should not weaponize the word
Right.
and apply it where it needs to be did.
People are. That's true.
Yes.
I am one also. But the issue had been, like, when I listened to our superintendent, as he commented, because we don't have that.
Yeah.
That is not what is happening. And so the other.
Hold on, let's check. Dan?
Yeah.
Can you confirm, can you deny, like, what is your perspective of that? 'Cause we're like, we don't do that.
What?
Because we worked our way through our list, right?
No, I think we had a great conversation. Thank you guys for listening. And for me, I'll go right back to it. I feel it brought clarity to the conversation because I think had we not done this, I don't know if necessarily we would have had the same clarity moving forward.
But there can be a space, as we get into, there can be a space where the thing that I picked up on Dan saying is there was not a lot of acrimony amongst us as we decided what went where. And I'll just say from my time when I got elected last April, that was not a decision. Because there are things that are statutorily, clearly the board's responsibility that people had arguments about whether we're micromanaging. And this is, and for me, the issue in that space is we can have a difference of opinion, but we have to continue to move forward with the things that we need to do. And those are things that I think as a community, we have been challenged with. And so the next part, because you can't always just respond to criticisms, because now that we're at a place where no one thinks they're being actively micromanaged, well, the next thing is they all just agree. So it's like, even as you improve the thing that was a problem, you're still losing. But that's because sometimes people just don't want you to win.
So I don't know if I'm interjecting, but I want to piggyback on some things that I heard too. And I think one thing that I really appreciate and being reflective about what we're doing and the work that we've done is creating the intentional culture that we are, because I think culture has happened because culture occurs when people work together, but being intentional about and being proactive, like you said, like this is where we know the bar needs to be. Like this is like the climate, like this is the temperature in the room that is optimal for growth. And we are setting the thermostat, right? Like with this work and being able to step back and say, even if we step away, like terms end, people move on, et cetera, we're gonna kind of keep it there so that we can continue to cultivate growth. Like I find a lot of value. Like it's like one of the proudest things that I feel about like the work we've done is being able to like, with the diversity of thought that we have on the board, be able to agree on this is the temperature, like this is what we need. So I think that that's really cool. And I think that it's, I mean, I won't speak for Dr. Keizer, but I think like, as I've seen, you grow into and like cultivate the wonderful things that you are doing in our district. I hope that that has helped you. And as you can see on our list here, most of that work belongs to administration. And like, we have to keep that in mind too, that like the climate that we set and the culture that we set has like such a huge impact on like all the other things that were on that side of on those check boxes. Like, we have the ability to augment and uplift and set positive tone and positive intent, or we don't. So I hope that that's part of what we keep mindful of in our work, is that like, you know, it's not just about the 7 of us in our discussion, it's about the impact that what we talk about and how we talk about has on our administration here too, you know.
Any other things you'd like to suggest to Sean and Dan to incorporate their responses?
I think even just going through the process, I got to know all the other board members better. And where they're coming from and perspectives and what they see, and so that I can at least know where they're coming. I can address questions if I have a statement or something to Amy. I can address it in a way that focuses on what her interests are, the way she phrases things and so on, to make it easier to understand, so that I can change what I'm saying. So just spending that time together just really changed the way you view each other, and knowing that we don't all have the same point of view. But just being able to communicate easily makes a big difference as to how we move forward.
And I think learning like the best way to communicate with each other, not that we have to cater to anyone. Think I'm back at next, you know, and but if I know someone is more reflective, then if they're receiving new information, just give them a minute and then check in, not pounds, which sometimes I do.
No.
So feel free to say, like, I need a minute. And that's timeout works as well.
Right.
Some of us, yeah.
Too, so you know what's the.
Oh, flagrant, yellow card, it's possible. And the other thing is that some of us are more direct than others. I'm very direct. And so that's why I love like the assuming positive intent, because if your communication style is different than mine, then it may come across as something that it is not. So I think it's so important for us to assume positive intent and just check in like, hey, this is what I was sensing. And you'd be like, no, absolutely not. Or you'd be like, yep, that was it. But having that information either way is helpful.
I would just, if you guys are at the conference, just speak about the term and how, from a community standpoint, a new board member having children in the district. I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with having a teenage girl.
Girls are amazing.
But I think just like to see them from the standpoint of you guys being in the trenches, like I think other boards need to understand that to the fact that it was tough, and it's going to get tough when you guys stuck in there. Pull your own self. You said less. So.
All right, we don't do mushies, so we're gonna cut you.
I do mushy, no, I do mushy. No, come here. I'm gonna go into that colors test, I'm a blue, I'm like I'm the.
No, I'm just saying, I think, and we get a bad rep, we know, and we get a really bad rep, I just think that you guys really behind us. The vocal point, like, well, I'm not doing that, you're not doing it for you, like, these kids need us. So,
Yeah.
I'm coming here, I'm scrap on what I need to scrap on, and
And just very briefly, I think it's important and encouraged to kind of check in on people. And that doesn't take a lot of effort, but like Greg, how's your day going? or when someone, you know, how are you doing? Because this, it can, and that's fine. If it's board related. Let me finish my point, because it's important, and Dan won't mind me sharing, I hope you know, tell me later if you do. But like when we do our individual meetings, I'm intentional of, I start with like, how are you? Because all of those things that are in green, that's Dan. And that's a lot. It's like, how are you? And I try to be intentional about closing. What support do you need from us? Because we set the vision, but the admin executes it, but we need to provide them with what they need. And we also need to support each other. Like, yeah, we, you know,
Like sometimes we bring cake.
sometimes.
Well, if we're not conducting.
Not four or more.
Business, it does not have to be noticed. We're not making decisions.
But I think it's a good idea too.
However, if people saw all 7 cars in one place.
What's next? True, right,
Keep closing, yeah.
Well, one of the things that's.
No.
One of the other reasons that we also wanted to have this table, because even if you look at like the regular agenda items, when we're going down, we just don't have the opportunity to have some informal conversation
Right.
as it's listed to an agenda item. And that vacuum of the ability to develop a relationship with people that you don't know really well, because you're only seeing them on Tuesday nights. That task, completing the task, the vacuum of a relationship not being there, we feel that has been some things that have contributed to some of the issues with board members. And then, of course, there was a pandemic in between and other stuff. But we wanted to make sure that, you know, the agenda item is board development is posted, but to have these conversations where people can be informal, but really have that ability to work it out with each other at the table is important. It's something that other communities might not need it, but it's something that we felt we needed as a community.
So I'll disagree just slightly and
That's
briefly.
because.
I'm wired slightly differently. I think relationships are great, but, and stick with me, Drew, because this is gonna sound offensive.
Yeah, jump off, Drew.
Relationships don't matter.
They do.
And let me provide some context. People did not elect me to sit on the board and do my best work as long as I like everyone who's sitting at the table with, which I don't have a problem with. Just in case you wonder. They didn't say go do your best work as long as you and Greg get along. So it doesn't matter how I feel about someone, my community is still expecting me to show up and do my best work. That's why I say relationships don't matter. They're great, but that can't be the thing that determines, do we show up as our best selves or not?
But it can be a challenge for people to show up as their best selves
They
when the relationships are extremely.
get over it. That's just, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, good.
Board member leaders.
Yeah. All right, so we've accomplished 3 things tonight. One is you have your collective commitments. You went from draft to final, and we're all good. You have collectively and comprehensively identified and agreed on issues and situations that have and will continue to come up, and who owns them, who's laying.
Does anyone have a problem with me including that with the collective board commitments?
Okay. And the third thing is you processed and gave some ideas to Dan and Sean about what to say at the state convention next week. So that's been helpful as well. So any final comments? If not, I would like to ask, starting with you, Greg, just 1 sentence or less, how you're feeling about what we accomplished tonight.
It feels good to accomplish and get something finished that we've been working on for a long time, knowing that it's been a target, just to finally be able to complete it. Feels really good.
Okay. Thank you. Sean.
I am happy to sit with our new team and begin work. Thankful for the work that was done to give us a good start for tonight.
Thank you.
John?
I'm excited for the opportunity. It sounds like I'm not good at everything. Crack some jokes, and probably have to Amy and bring some cakes, but at this point, like I'm not really excited that I didn't come here to cheers and each other.
Next week.
Let me call any board meetings, if they're not good. I'll see them then.
We'll get to that next.
All right, I'll leave.
I guess I'm just saying it's very welcoming so far, and I think I appreciate all the conversation. I love Amy's comments in particular. I try to tell people it is almost impossible to offend me, because if you're saying what needs to be said, you can have a conversation and go have a beer afterwards, right? So I definitely appreciate that comment, and I think there's been some thoughtful work. I look forward to continuing it.
Dan?
I'm very proud of the work that we've done thus far, and I would say our first one was our first step, and now we're taking our second step, so. Hopeful for the.
So I am excited to continue executing our collective commitments because they just became final officially tonight. But I feel really comfortable that these are things that we are doing. And then that accountability piece, like I say, no one at this table is shy. Like we can lovingly call each other out, like, and I'm sure that'll continue. And I'm hopeful with the two of you, like, hey, Joanne, number 4, sir, number 4, or you know, I just said that. And yeah, and we just move forward.
Yeah, I feel a lot of gratitude for everybody who worked together with on this point to get us to where we are, and gratitude for being able to sit here with all of you now, and that's a comma, I'm still in the same sentence, and very excited about sitting here this time next year and seeing all the more growth that we've accomplished and the higher level of excellence that we will get to achieve.
Did some great work tonight. Thanks for hanging in and getting it done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're right. You're right.
Drew, are you leaving us?
He's out.
Right.
Yep.
Can they pick?
Yeah.
Like, is that
No,
after that we
we're
putting you
not
on the
gonna-
spot?
We're gonna
Not
not
gonna
do
do that
that.
to them?
We're not gonna do that stuff. Is that
Yeah.
like everybody?
We should ask them.
No, everything's gonna be fine, but like, I got my little, I'm gonna let Dr. Keiser talk to Trigger, but like, everybody I think can see my script's a small table. Okay. So I'm gonna give you same meetings. This is the next agenda item, as far as like the culminating part of our workshop, then we're gonna go team and split, okay? Or adjourn, whatever you prefer. Okay, so what we're gonna do real quick is just get a high level, like here are the topics that that we all identified. Is there any way, Dan, to get these on like the big screen? Okay, okay, so I'm just looking at my screen now. Okay, so let me just slow this. Okay, I'm gonna scooch this down. Okay. So yeah, the mentor thing is first. So just the purpose of having a mentor as you come onto the board is just to have so you have a specific person to give an overview of like what we do, develop a relationship for assistance, although all of us are here for you. Like you're not like, oh, sorry, I talked to Sean. Like, oh, we're all here for you, we're all your team. But it's just nice to have like, oh, I've got a quick question, and then you kind of get your person. Okay. We're gonna like start with like assigning and figuring that out. And then once you guys have kind of paired off, we're gonna like set expectations for how and when to meet. And it should be like on the mentor that kind of like make sure you're reaching out to that new board member, kind of like what Amy was saying, just kind of check in, just check in and make sure everybody's doing okay. So having said that, okay, did I just see like everybody's willing to be a mentor? I think it should be.
You don't have to pick right now, you don't have to make it public.
Okay, so like when we're done kind of running through everything, we'll pair off. Everybody just will. So decide which of us are coolest, and then we'll all judge you for your job. I'm just totally kidding. Although we don't like okay. Next is the communication norms and expectations. So just for like cohesion and sanity for everybody, Dr. Keiser can't operate with 7 bosses, right? So like we're a collective voice, and so we try to channel our communication with Dr. Keiser through the board president. If you are on a committee and you would like a committee, just like the committee chair is get more into that in a minute. I don't know. We're here. It's all good. No, it's cool. I'm trying to be efficient there. So like, okay, so if there's a committee agenda kind of question, no, you can say thank you.
And you guys scroll as you need.
You know, talk to your committee chair, and the committee chair will talk to Dr. Keiser, because like your committee chairs are the people establishing that agenda. But for the most part, if you're like, oh, I got a quick question, or oh, I had this question from a committee member, I'm not sure what to do with it, whatever, you can send that to the board president. That way the board president will be like, oh, here, I got you. Like, and maybe that doesn't need to go to Dr. Keiser, or like, yep, and then maybe, you know, they can actually know that maybe like, oh, but it's just like 12 other things coming, so we're gonna consolidate that all into one communication, so his phone's not like, right, and we don't want that, okay. So anyway, out of a courtesy, that's been our practice. The board president does communicate with the public on behalf of the board with the goal of a 48-hour turnaround time. So if there's an email, it's predominantly email, we get those, and it's gonna, a range of things. It could be like, my child is being bullied. It could be like, I'm very upset with an action that you all took your last meeting, like whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's positive. Every so often we get really nice, but mostly it's people who have some issues they need to resolve. Right, and that's fine. And so the board president is going to respond on behalf of the board, and if it's usually what I've done is I've tried to at least like CC in or loop in Dr. Keiser, just so like he has some visibility and awareness to like kind of what the conversations are and things like that. But yeah, all right.
But if someone emails you as a board member,
Right.
then our norm is
Oh,
that
yeah.
you would respond to that person within 48 hours.
Right.
If they like email all of us, then the board president would respond.
If they're like, hey, Brian, I gotta talk to you. Yeah. Yeah, so you're not, okay, yeah, and thank you for nobody is, nobody is like, oh, sorry, you can't, like, yeah, like someone reaches you, or you'll be like, you gotta talk to the board president, like, you're good. But it's just like things that come to the board, that's kind of like our mouthpiece for the board. Okay.
And it's to make sure like, oh, I thought Joanne was gonna respond, so I didn't, or oh, I thought, you know, they get a response.
Right, same thing, like if like the paper calls or whatever, I mean, you know, we've got like, you know, you're just, yeah, I mean, nobody's like muzzled, but usually you're just kind of like, oh, you know, just talk to board president, whoever, and that's, you know, that's my jam. But don't feel like if you have a strong, you know, someone's like, hey, what'd you think about like this awesome thing that happened? It'll be like, well, I have no, I mean, you can be like, yeah, I'm excited, you know. So you want to find that space of clarity, and typically the board president speaks for the board, or, you know, Dr. Keiser speaks for the district.
Well, I mean, I think that the basic part is this, the board president speaks for the board, you speak for you.
Right, that's
But
what.
there's, and to understand that sometimes when people are asking you questions, just be clear to represent that you're speaking for yourself, not for all of us, because we have to take collective action, or that's our mouthpiece. And I think that, you know, respond appropriately as you feel necessary, but that's one of the other things too, that we've kind of been, we talked about our communication. How much communication should we have, but at the same time to be a little bit disciplined, where we're just not putting extra things out there and make more of a mess for ourselves. So,
And usually once a year, I invite Rob to come out, who's their legal counsel, been legal counsel for 40 years. Give his kind of top 10 list. Here was the top 5, and usually one of the things he always talks about is the board acting at full. The board has its power when it meets as a whole, and he always gives an example of case studies, and usually the one that he brings up is a board member who was introduced at a legislative hearing in Madison as a board member and never corrected the record and just continued to talk as an individual and say, no, I'm here as a citizen of whatever community that was. And they got back to the community and created all sorts of uproar. So sometimes you have to be mindful of how people are introducing you, so that if you need to clarify that, that's where it comes in. Because you will be identified as so-and-so and board member of school district board.
Buckle up. All right.
And I would,
Yeah.
and I would just say for you, Joanna, because you have a child in the district, like for me, if I'm emailing as a parent, just be clear, it's from my personal account, and I even state that, or if I like call someone, I'm like, hey, calling as a parent, not as like, you know, because you don't want to even give the impression like, do this because, or whatever, like, I just need clarity as a parent. So just being clear on that is helpful.
All right, confidentiality, so anything that occurs in. I am so sorry, well, that's covered anyway in our collective commitments. So like, let's say it's a 6-1 vote and you're the one, and then the paper calls you the next day, well, spill.
No, I don't.
So it's public, it's public record.
All right, so the newspaper will call me.
They watch the meeting.
The same newspaper that said I didn't, they would call me.
That was adorable.
Okay, no, we're gonna be positive, it's
Yeah.
all good, everybody's fine, so yeah, so they might call you and say,
I
listen,
didn't say-
well, yeah, you
Absolutely.
But that's the thing, it's like, even if you have like this, like, what I've seen people do in the past, say, listen, you're moving, like, I respect the will of the board. I did think, this was like what informed my decision,
Yeah.
but listen, we're moving forward, this is the thing, and this is where we're going, and I fully
And I'm
support.
speaking as myself, not as.
Right, like me as the
The
dissenting
media will take
voter.
it and say, this is what
But you just need to make it clear that, like, because that's part of our board. This was the action that the board took. And I'm gonna honor the collective action. of the board.
It's been space, like I said, when we assign the vote, you'll be for something or against something. There's a space to state that, and even in explaining why you voted against something. The thing that what is destructive is, this is a decision the board made, and I think it's stupid. I mean, it's just like the.
Yeah, that's the line.
I'm saying that.
Right.
Well, the other thing, in my opinion, that is destructive / distracting to me, I have many times been the dissenting vote, which is fine. But then I'm not gonna later say, well, that thing that I didn't support, or that thing that I don't think we should do, like, you gotta let it go.
Yeah.
It ends with the vote, and you don't have to now support it or now agree with it, but don't be destructive in the direction that the board has decided to move. That becomes problematic.
So yeah, if someone wants to know, well, why did you vote that? Of course, you go be great, say what you gotta say, but then it's like, here's where we're going, and it's gonna be okay.
And that's the space with collective commitments. It's just that we're trying to create that foundation for things to happen and then move forward. Because people don't always agree about what should happen.
It's a moment in time and it's a decision, and unlike what some people think, many things are not written in granite and can be changed at a later date. We can, plenty of times where we've made decisions and we've come back and we've said, hey, are we still in the same spot? And sometimes we have and sometimes we haven't, and that's okay. What we want to avoid is, and this hasn't happened, it almost happened, but it didn't happen, where it was like a vote, every meeting, the same vote comes back because someone is trying to get it. But that didn't happen.
Then you see what you did to
Hey.
We're so far away from that. That we're having the conversation about, we can have that.
Since Dan went there, I will just say this. One thing that I was proud of as a board, that happened. And I did not agree with the revisiting of the situation, but it was being done improperly. So I didn't agree with it, but I assisted a board member in crafting the motion that I did not agree, because I respect the process. And that board member had every right, like, don't sit and complain about it. But if you want to bring a motion to the floor to potentially change it, I'm gonna help you do that, even though I don't support the thing that you're trying. So that was like a proud moment for me, because the process won out.
And I think that's a turning point. I think it is through those particular moments in time that helped us clarify the vision that that's not where we want to be. We want to go somewhere else, and that's why we are here today.
Mm-hmm.
So as we talk about respecting board decisions, that's why, from a legal standpoint, they say the board acts, this is, and where Spencer represents 36,000 individuals. It is not the 1,000 or so people who voted for you individually. You are now representing 36,000 individuals, and collectively, the 8 of us are making making decisions that are impacting 6,000 students, 800 staff, and 36,000 community members in the school district of Beloit. And that's our role. And while we have this period of time together, we're gonna make the best decisions we can, guided by the principles and the actions that we set forward. And that's why we're doing strategic planning, and that's why we're doing the budgeting, and that's why we're doing the things that we're going to bring up on our agendas. And we only can do what we can do. And there's gonna be a whole lot of people who are gonna want us to do that times 10. And the reality is we're not gonna be able to do it. We have to just be able to say, here are our commitments, here's our roadmap, and then this is the actions and the steps that we're gonna take. And we'll move forward one step at a
I
time.
want to highlight one more as we move on, but respecting board decisions is sitting views. We're all sitting at this table unmasked. That was a difficult decision to make when we made that about what we thought we needed to do for the health and safety of children. And the position that I had was that I don't, as an elected leader, I believe that certain decisions should be made by those elected people. So I was not for delegating the decision out, just like they had to make decisions about what was the superintendent's, the board. So I feel my money into that vote. But we went through the whole process by the guidelines that they established in the plan, say what we would do and how we would make a determination if masks were not needed. And that going through that whole process to the point that yes, the federal government changed things before, but people are like, when are you gonna change it? When are you gonna change it? But for us, the process was already defined about how we were gonna do what we were gonna do. And we followed that process. And to me, again, that's a small victory for us as a team because we decided something and we followed through on that decision. And now we're at a place. Sometimes people want us to do things faster than things happen. But for me, I was happy with our process because we did what we said we were gonna do. So those are small things, but those are important things for us because we're building up each successive action. It's a positive for us.
Great comment. So with regard to confidentiality, things that are in closed session, like have to stay in closed session, like there's a lot, and when you go to the WASB, like intro to school boarding stuff, that's next week, we'll go to, it'll be great. They're gonna talk a lot more about the legality of this, but it's legally, and just ethically significant, the things that occur in closed session, stay in closed session. And it's like very, serious repercussions, and can really cause a lot of harm, we all take very seriously. Same goes like if there's anyway, that'll fall under the closed session thing and it's late, so I'm gonna move on. Open meetings laws are also very serious and can be a little confusing sometimes. The one that I highlighted, reply all. So I'm gonna send out emails periodically, or whoever is board president or whatever, I'll send out like what I got for the practice of doing as much as I could, like, hey, just a heads up, this is kind of what we're going over next Tuesday. Does anybody have any questions, whatever. And then it's very important that you not reply all, that you reply to the sender of the email. The reason for that is that if you have a quorum, which you would if it's an email to the full board, if two-way communication is initiated, it becomes a meeting legally. So you have to like really, and it seems, and I know it's sometimes it's like a chuckle moment, but they're like, and I think like when we talked on Saturday, I mentioned there was this time when we were buying flowers for somebody, like somebody was sick, and I went to Bushel and Peck and I started a text thread with 3 other board members, and I texted out like, what should we get so and so, and one board member responded, we have to, nope, there's 4 of us on here. It didn't even occur to me, like it, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, never mind. So like we cut that off, and we bought, yep, and it was actually plant, to be very clear, plants, but flowers or plants, whatever. Anyway, so it was a minute ago, but it's like something is innocent. Like, I mean, it can, the public trust and the perception that we're doing things with prayer, even if it seems like something stupid, like we just need to follow rules. Gotta follow rules because that's part of like what we owe our community, right? So you'll hear a lot more about open meetings laws at the SWASB thing next week that we're gonna go to for whatever reason you can. I know they usually record them, and any of us can help you with that stuff too. So
right, and there's always the chance meeting, right? And so the legal litmus test that goes along with that is, let's say three of you find yourselves at
We're all at Woodman's.
Woodman together
Yep.
and stuff like that. Someone sees you and they call me up and say, hey, 3 board members were at Woodman's and they're filing up. The first question that a district attorney is always gonna ask, and so it's the question that I ask those individuals who anonymously email me is, what board action did you overhear them discussing? And usually I get crickets, and then it's like, it's done. Because that's, you live in the community, you're gonna have chance meetings. But if you have a chance meeting and no board business is being discussed, even with Megan's, like, if you know that this has the potential, you stop it. But if it's a chance thing, and even if conversations, you're like, okay, what board business was happening in that text message, and it's clear that they're talking about plants and flowers, that it's done. So, but
But I think a reality for you to understand about where we are at now is that we are highly open records requested.
This current word, boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Regularly.
regularly. It costs money.
Which is fine.
Yes, that does cost money.
it does cost us money.
It don't cost us.
We have not charged, and that's something that a future board discussion that I would like to bring up to this
Many
board
boards
is.
charge or districts charge.
Well, I was gonna ask you, sorry.
That was the conversation.
Discussion for another night.
The point is this, we believe in transparency, sunshine, government.
Yeah.
So no one is trying to conduct board business inappropriately.
Right.
But coming into the board, those are things that you should know, that have been most recently a challenge to us in our district. There's a newspaper article about open meetings, records requests, and all kind of other things.
So I'll just say one like practical thing is that, because I'm a parent in the district, people have my personal email, which is fine, but sometimes people ask me a board question using my personal email. Always forward that email to your district email. So it's there and it's.
And then respond from your district email.
Yep, so I wouldn't risk, like, if I'm not gonna chastise anyone or, oh, you should not, I just forward it to my board email and then I respond from there. But the good thing with that, and do it right away so you don't have to think about it, is if you are open meetings requested, they will give you kind of the parameters. Like these dates, communication with these people, etc. And the district will do a search through your district email and pull all of those for you.
Automatic. So
Yeah.
you won't have to search that. Oh.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what, just forward it to yourself.
Text messages.
If someone texts you and they're discussing board business,
It's not like.
yeah, you're feeling better, but board business, I just do a screenshot and then forward it to my district email. And then that way it's already taken care of.
Okay, and let me just clarify that though, like if I text, because like, okay, so like for open records requests, like between employees though, so like if I text Dan, hey, how are you? That still is open records requestable. If it's like, we wanna see any board business conducted between you and like a citizen, but if it's like you and an administrator and like you heard that like Teresa was sick and you sent her like a get well, so that's still open records because it's like you know what I'm saying? So like you have to like.
About board business.
Well, some of them are about board business. I think with an administrator, I mean, we will ask, but I just skip everything.
Yeah.
I'll say it like this, it's a legitimate purpose for
Yeah.
citizen government,
Absolutely.
but we also, in my opinion, board member leaders, there are some people I think who are using us as slaves.
We'll talk about
So,
that.
but we want you to be.
On another night,
On another, okay,
because it's 9:50.
it is 9:53. So we're gonna move on. So Robert's rules. So this is gonna workshop. This is, Amy
You
is the
got your
expert.
book.
Never rely on Robert.
Never,
That's all.
we will know whether or not Robert said it, and we'll point it out. I'm just kidding. So Robert's rules, this is a workshop, it's been very informal, but as you noticed earlier, like we conduct all of our board meetings, according to Robert's rules. So you got your handbook, it's wonderful. I gave you like a little hyperlink to a cheat sheet. This is available, it's in public, it's available to everybody in the community. If anybody's, you can go click on that little part, like the PDF and it'll pop up there.
on the April 26th meeting, may be electing a parliamentarian for policy, so we'll have maybe a more in-depth conversation then, but we will, and listen, there are no dumb questions. If you're not sure if Robert said it, just ask. It's all good. This is a safe space.
Robert may show up in our meetings.
And a good thing that the administration usually does, if something is listed as an action item, 9 times out of 10, there's motion language provided. So you can kind of use that as a guide if you want to create a motion. Yeah, so that's helpful.
Yeah, and we'll all figure it out. It's all, we're good. All right. I'm gonna pause real quick. Are we doing okay? So far, so good. Okay. Board norms, collective commitments we just talked about, and I did hyperlink the board norms are there as well. Those are found. What that'll take you to is the library part of board docs, and that's all public. So everybody in the universe can click on that, and it's all visible in there. Yes.
So do you guys have your login for board docs?
Yes.
Okay, because Michelle has helped, love you, Michelle. I was like, I can't access executive content, like our minutes aren't public until after they're approved, but in order to vote to approve the minutes, it helps if you read them first. So I'm like, Michelle, I can't access it. She said, so come, she goes, is your person filled in? And I'm like, no, it's not. So there's a little person icon, and if it's filled in, then you're logged in, and so the system knows that you're a board member and you have access to executive committee, and that's not public.
We
So-
don't have that yet, we'll have that Tuesday.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
you don't have that yet. You
But
have
yeah.
your email.
Email.
Right.
Yeah, email.
Board docs is different. Yeah, and we'll walk you and your mentor or Michelle and all of us will help you with all that for sure. So you've heard a lot about our ongoing professional development. So I'm going to move on to committee norms. Okay. So something that I've noticed in the community has caused some confusion. Like I know, like with the SRO contract, somebody emailed me and was like, well, there must have been a secret meeting because we don't recall the full board ever talking about this before it went to committee. And that is because we revised last July how our committee process worked. So just in case you used to pay attention and didn't, whatever, like here's how the things work now. So we adopted a new committee structure in July of 2021 for many reasons. I hyperlinked you to, there's a whole page for board committees to click away at your leisure. Items begin in committee before they come to the full board. So like Dr. Keyser will sit down with the committee chair and say, listen, we've got this facilities plan coming up and it's got to be approved by this date. Let's get it on this agenda or whatever. So things start in committee. They come to committee the first time and it's discussion only so that we can roll up our sleeves and do all the messy work in committee. We want thoughtful, like well put together things to come forward to the board. So it's not to say, because like a lot of times you want to hear, we don't need a meeting for 6 hours, et cetera, et cetera. But like the long in the weeds meeting things should happen in committee. And then it's like, okay. And then during the next board meeting, there's a committee report. So your chair will be like, listen, we got in the weeds on this topic in committee. If you have some thoughts, like if you couldn't come or you don't have time to watch the YouTube version of it, whatever, let me know, like we'll talk about it. So then it's gonna come back to committee again, now for action. Now that's not to say other things, there's maybe still some sleeve rolling up going on, some things. And that's the point where the committee votes to move something or not to move something to the full board. So it comes twice through committee. Now it lands on the full board onto the consent agenda. Now you can pull something off the consent agenda like we did with the SRO contract, for example. We pulled it off the consent agenda. Board member Levy, I think we had a couple of additional questions, which is totally acceptable and totally fine. It's not like, oh, we already talked about this committee, we can't talk about it. It's just like for practical logistical purposes, things land there because any board member can pull anything off the consent agenda to discuss. But like for all practical purposes, it's been discussed twice in committee. Everybody has access to committee meetings, right? You should hypothetically have most of your questions and information at your fingertips, right?
And if you want to join a committee, you can. I mean, Greg sometimes just sits in on the committee, and the committee chair has the ability to recognize board members who aren't on the committee and invite them into the discussion if they so choose.
And if you are a chair, please always do that. I have been in the committee. It was many moons ago, and the chair wouldn't acknowledge board members that weren't on the committee that wanted to speak. It's just a professional courtesy. If Megan comes to my policy committee and she's not on the committee, but she has input, just yield the floor.
No one is using Robert's rules to exclude people.
Right.
not weaponizing anything to keep board members from having input. But like I said, with the committee structure, it was done intentionally because we felt, I think, it's a consent agenda, like, we haven't had a chance to talk about this. So working with the administration, it comes up first for discussion as it comes up, and then the next month is when we're ready to take the action. So people have had the chance to deliberate and process, and we're making decisions that are being well informed and understanding things. And it helps the administration have a flow of when they can expect to get things done and these calendar and things like that.
Well, and like also, I mean, like that one of the major complaints about transparency that we see was like, well, your board meetings go till like, midnight or, 11 o'clock at night. Because if things hadn't been adequately sorted through in committee, then it's like now you're dealing with this full board, which is a mess. And sometimes things are challenging and complicated, and we will have that mess, right? But the general practice has been that we don't have that mess, and I'm personally very happy with that. So
The 3 people are doing the work in the committee, so when it comes to the 7 people, they can ask the questions and things can keep
Right.
moving.
we can just, because that's efficient.
Our goal, and that's part of the reason for the governance committee, is where the discussion around this new committee structure started, and then we brought it back through the full board, and then ultimately committed as a full board to this new structure. And it should be that continuous improvement, right? So this iteration of this structure has helped us to get our regular board meetings to be reasonably length. And now that, we should take that opportunity to revisit and say, how are we doing? Do we feel like we need to make any refinements or revisions and so on and so forth? I'll say, like, in that flow, the board chairs are taking more responsibility of kind of facilitating. This is what actually happened in the committee, which I think is a good thing, because what it does is it's really making the regular board meeting, with the exception of things that have to come straight to the full board, really a board discussion. Because the board chair is really carrying that load of their committee work to the full board and owning it and presenting it to the full board. And I'll say, like, what Amy does in either previewing policy, but then also talking about, here are the changes that we made in policy, and it's gonna be coming up on consent agenda next time or what.
And I just want to highlight briefly that we made, and thank you for putting July 2020, so that was 9 months ago. We had not seen the full fruit of that. We had like little tiny apples, but now you got apples that you can like wash and eat. 2 board meetings ago, we were done at 9 o'clock. And we were like confused for like 30 seconds, like, what do we do? Like, okay, we should go home.
8:04.
8:04.
Can you hide
But
that?
that's the thing. But this structure happened 9 months ago. So it's not instantaneous, so it's easy to say, oh, well, it didn't work. Didn't work because we're still here until the cock crows. Didn't work. It's like, no, we're on the right course. Keep doing the work, and then 9 o'clock, we're done. 8:04, we're done. Rant over.
And as a result of that, we can make some changes. Like, for example, one thing, like, we kind of took out like some of the like board recognition stuff because like people were complaining, like, the board meetings are getting too long. We're trying to stay away from the board business. This is not transparent, et cetera, et cetera. So we're like, cool, we're just gonna cut right to it. Well, now that we're done at 8:04, like, yeah, we want to like honor some schools, so we'll have that, you know what I'm saying? And so we're going to continuously, we're going to be reflective practitioners of all those things. So anyway, it's late, so I'm conscious that that's going to keep rolling through. But when you sit down with your mentor, have them explain all the committees and stuff for you, okay? Board docs is where it's everything's in board docs. When you guys get access, we'll go through all the things. It'll be good. All right, if you haven't already, is this your copy? You got it. Okay, you just received a copy of all the 100 series policies. That's all of our board policy stuff. It's cool. Look through it. We'll go through it.
It's also online.
Policy is our
Public
favorite.
area.
Yes, it is in the library on board docs. Or no, it's online. There's a whole tab, right, for policy. Yeah, next. Get started.
Oh, is that this binder here?
Yeah, that's just 100 series.
That's
Just 100.
There's other series.
We have 8 more if you really want it.
It's like Harry
It's
Potter.
okay, everybody's fine.
Okay.
I'll wait for the movie then.
Right.
It's got a tape recorder
We
version
love
of policy, can I get a CD?
random fun fact, if you like download it, I can just hit play and it will read the policy for me.
Speaking of this, great segue to technology. Technology is our friend for the reason highlighted by
$10 app.
All right, you guys have your, so here's the jam with email. Okay, so email, do not reply all with email. Done. All right, log in for board docs. Okay, Michelle's gonna get you all set up with your sworn in. Google Meets. Okay, here's a couple of things with Google Meets. So there are times like when we have, because of COVID, there is now sort of which I think is a good expectation, because when I first got on the board, there was a legitimate argument about could we go on TV without closed captioning, and there was actually, there was a lot of conflict over whether we would like record and televise meetings and things like that. We are clearly beyond that conversation now, thanks to COVID, and so what our practice has been, and it's certainly something we can reflect on, but even though we're all here in person, we still like get in our rectangle on Google Meets, and then that's what's recorded and put on YouTube. So it is like, there's a little camera over there, like we're on TV, but also we record YouTube, like this all is going on YouTube, like when, tomorrow or whatever, we're ready to put it up there. So it's important for our viewers, because like people got complaints in the past, like you want to have, be in your rectangle, like on Google Meets. In order to do that, you have to double mute. You have to mute on your physical computer, like on your device, and you have to click the mute button. Otherwise, you get like the screechy feedback all in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta mute. Yeah, mute your device.
Mute all your things.
And then, okay, this is gonna seem stupid, but listen, how this thing works, okay, so you have like this little microphone deal. Only 3 of them, so echoey, at a time can be lit up. So if you're all like, that's why like I always wait till the end to say, can I turn this on without it blowing something up? Okay. So you push this little speaker button, the red light's on, means you're talking. Now, if 3 red lights are on and you go to talk, it'll just flash green at you. It'll be like, sorry, now your turn. So when you're not speaking, keep your red light on. Even if you're to keep it, because otherwise somebody else, it could cause, this is tedious nonsense, but it can be annoying if you don't know the rules. So now we know the rules of feedback and microphones. Anybody else have anything for technology challenges? You will, and we will help you, or you won't, and we will, and you will help us. Okay, so that is all I had. And I know it's a little bit late, we get a lot of things.
John checked his watch.
I saw that, we didn't include to adjourn. Actually, this is a never ending meeting because we forgot to include the adjourn part, but we're gonna adjourn anyway. And we'll accept that amendment to the agenda at 10:07. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, motion by Schneider, second by A. Levy at 10:07. I just want to real quick thank you so much for coming and participating this with us. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Good. We're done. All right. Who's mentoring him? All the boys.